What if Izuku got the Shadow Monarch powers and was sent to Hazbin Hotel creating breeding harem with Charlie, Vaggie and all queens? Chapter 1, The Dead Don't Stay Dead. The rift opened without warning. 1 second Izuku was in the middle of a collapsing dimensional pocket, his shadow domain stretched to its absolute limit, shadow soldiers dissolving faster than he could raise them against a Noma variant that had somehow learned to eat darkness. The next second the pocket folded in on itself, the Noma shrieked, and the implosion punched a hole through something that definitely wasn't supposed to be punchable. He fell through red. Not red like blood or fire, red like the whole sky had been dipped in it, every cloud bruised purple at the edges, the air thick and warm and smelling like sulfur and something sweeter underneath, like burned caramel. He had maybe 3 seconds of freefall to register that this was not Muzutafu, was not Japan, was not anywhere he'd ever been or heard of, before the roof of a building came up to meet him at terminal velocity. He hit it chest first. The roof caved. He went through. Hit a floor. Went through that too. Landed in a lobby on his back with about 2 tons of debris raining down on top of him, and lay there staring up at the double hole he'd punched through what appeared to be a pink and gold Victorian building while his body ran a rapid damage assessment and came back with, hurts a lot, nothing broken, shadow system nominal, location unknown, threat level unknown. The dust settled. Something poked him with a broom handle. It's not moving, said a high, chirpy voice. Should I sweep it? Don't sweep it, Nifty. A different voice, female, steady, carrying the specific tension of someone who was already reaching for a weapon. Get back. Izuku opened his eyes. 6 figures stood around the edges of the debris crater he'd made in their lobby. He catalogued them fast, small red cyclops with a broom who looked genuinely disappointed she couldn't sweep him up, a tall guy, no, a spider demon, 8 eyes and extra arms, leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed and an expression of profound entertainment, an old catman behind what appeared to be a bar who hadn't even put down his drink, a red and black entity in a tailored suit watching from the shadows with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and in front of all of them, a pale woman with a short dark ponytail, ash-gray skin, and a spear leveled at his sternum with the steady grip of someone who actually knew how to use it. And behind her, slightly forward, like she'd been about to push past the spear woman to help him, pink and yellow dress. Blonde hair. The biggest, most genuinely concerned eyes he'd ever seen on anyone, demon or human, and a pair of small black horns that flickered with suppressed hellfire. Oh gosh, she said. Are you okay? The spear didn't waver. Charlie, stand back. He literally just fell through our roof, Vaggie, I think we can, he could be an assassin. He could be one of Valentino's people. He looks like a teenager. Assassins can be teenagers. Izuku sat up. Debris slid off him. He raised both hands, palm out, the universal not a threat gesture, and looked directly at the spear woman, Vaggie, apparently, because she was the one who mattered right now. The one with the weapon, the one with the tactical position, the one whose eyes were doing the real threat assessment. I'm not an assassin, he said. I don't know where I am. I fell through a dimensional rift and your building was in the way. I'm sorry about your roof. Silence. He sounds sincere, the spider demon said, examining his nails. Also confused. That part's pretty convincing. Angel, Vaggie said, nobody asked you. Nobody ever does, toots. The spear stayed up. Vaggie's eyes were sharp, gold where the light caught them, and they were doing exactly what Izuku's eyes were doing, reading him, checking his hands, checking his shadow, checking exits. Trained fighter. Good instincts. She'd made her assessment of him as a threat before he'd finished sitting up. He kept his hands visible and held her gaze. Not a challenge. Just honesty. He'd learned a long time ago that you couldn't outstare people like this, you just had to let them see you weren't hiding anything. 3 seconds. 5. 8. She didn't lower the spear, but her shoulder dropped 2 centimeters. She'd made a decision. Charlie, she said, not looking away from Izuku. He's your call. The blonde woman, Charlie, was around his side of the crater before Vaggie finished the sentence, crouching down with zero hesitation to meet him at eye level, and up close she was even more striking, bright and warm the way a fire is warm when you're cold, eyes like cartoon stars that somehow managed to be completely genuine. Hi. I'm Charlie Morningstar. This is the Hazbin Hotel. Welcome to hell, I guess. She paused. You did know you were in hell, right? Izuku looked at the red sky through the holes in the ceiling. Looked at the demons surrounding him. Felt the ambient death energy saturating every molecule of air in this place, the Shadow Monarch system in his chest humming like a tuning fork pressed against a bell. I'm starting to figure that out, he said. I'm Izuku Midoriya. You're human, said the suited figure from the shadows. Not a question. His voice was layered, like multiple radio frequencies stacked on top of each other, and his smile was wide and static and completely unreadable. How remarkable. Alastor, Charlie said, the warning light in her voice, please don't be weird about this. My dear, I am always weird. It's part of my charm. Izuku filed him under, extremely dangerous, unknown agenda, do not turn your back on him. The power radiating off that entity was immense, old and hungry and vast, like a radio signal that went out so far it wrapped around the world and came back distorted. Whatever Alastor was, he wasn't just a demon. He was something that had been here a very long time and accumulated things along the way. He filed the others too, angel dust, loud and probably lethal underneath the comedy, husk, quieter and more dangerous than he looked, nifty, the kind of chaotic variable you never fully accounted for. Vaggie, threat level high, motivations protective rather than predatory. Charlie, he couldn't quite file. She crouched in front of him with genuine concern on her face and offered him a hand up, and she was Lucifer's daughter in Hell's royal line with powers that could level city blocks, and she was helping a stranger up off her lobby floor like he tripped on the sidewalk. He took her hand and stood. You can have a room, she said immediately. While you figure out what happened and how to get home. We have vacancy. We always have vacancy. Something flickered behind the brightness, a real feeling under the performance. And you could maybe talk to some of our residents. We're a rehabilitation hotel, we're trying to prove that sinners can, Charlie, Vaggie said quietly. Right. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself. She let go of his hand, but not before giving it a small squeeze. Room first. Explanation later. Are you hungry? Husk, can we, I tend bar, Husk said flatly. I don't cook. I'll cook. Nifty raised her broom. You tried to cook last week and something escaped, Angel Dust said. It won't escape this time. Izuku was standing in the lobby of a hotel in hell with a patch of red sky visible through two holes he'd made in the ceiling, and somehow the bickering made him feel fractionally better. Chaos he understood. Chaos was familiar. Chaos meant people were alive and loud and present. He looked up at the damage he'd caused and said, I can fix the roof. Everyone looked at him. He reached into his shadow, the darkness pooling at his feet in the warm hellish light, and pulled. 6 shadow soldiers rose. They came out of the darkness like they were stepping through a doorway, massive humanoid shapes built of compressed darkness, not vague smoke but solid, defined, moving with purpose. They straightened, turned to face Izuku, and waited. The lobby went very quiet. Even Alastor's smile stiffened slightly at the edges. Vaggie had her spear up again in a half-second, but Izuku raised a hand and the soldiers stayed still. He pointed at the ceiling. They looked up. Then, without needing any more instruction, they turned and started carefully, methodically lifting debris and stacking it and doing what could generously be called structural repair work, which mostly involved bracing the damaged sections and collecting the fallen materials into organized piles. There. Charlie stared. What are they? Shadow soldiers, Izuku said. I can raise them from death energy, basically. Fallen fighters, defeated enemies. Their combat power becomes mine and they serve as my army. He paused. I know how that sounds. It sounds incredible, Charlie said, and she meant it, which was the most disorienting thing about her. No calculation behind it. Just genuine, open enthusiasm. I've never seen anything like that, and I've lived in hell my entire existence. I've also never seen anything like that, Alastor said pleasantly, and I've been here considerably longer. The way he said it made the hairs on Izuku's arms stand up. Charlie pulled him toward the staircase. Come on, I'll show you to a room. You can clean up, change. Do you need clothes? Angel has an entire closet, but most of it is fabulous, Angel supplied. His style, Charlie finished diplomatically. I'll manage, Izuku said. He had his hero costume, which had seen better days after the dimensional rift, but it was built tough. He followed Charlie up the stairs, and as he went he felt Vaggie's eyes on his back the entire way, and Alastor's smile on his periphery, and he made a quiet mental note to sleep light tonight. The room Charlie showed him was small and clean, red wallpaper with gold trim, a window that looked out over the Pentagram City skyline. He stood at that window for a moment after she left and just took it in, the towers and the neon and the constant movement, millions of souls going about whatever existence looked like here, and above it all that bruised red sky, endless and heavy. He was far from home. His system was running. His soldiers were working on the roof. He was going to be here a while. He started problem solving. Charlie knocked 20 minutes later, holding a tray with something that smelled edible and a glass of something that was definitely not water. She'd changed into more casual clothes, a white button-up and dark trousers, and had her hair down, which made her look younger and somehow more herself. Nifty made soup, she said. It's actually fine, I checked it for escaping things. He took the tray. Thanks. He hesitated. So. Hell. She leaned against the doorframe and her smile went slightly softer, less performance. It's not as bad as the name implies. I mean, it is, in some ways. The exterminations are, she stopped. What are those? She told him. Flat and direct, the way people talk about things they've accepted as reality even though accepting it still costs them something. Heaven sent exorcist angels down once a year to reduce the demon population. No warning. No mercy. Just killing, wholesale, to manage hell's overcrowding problem. Thousands dead every cycle. And there was nothing anyone had done to stop it because nothing in hell was strong enough to challenge heaven's forces. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "When's the next one?" "About 4 months." She looked at her hands. "That's why I started the hotel. If I can prove to heaven that demons can be redeemed, rehabilitated, become better, then maybe they'll agree there are other solutions to overcrowding than just," she gestured broadly. "Does heaven know about the hotel?" "They've been informed." Her voice went flat. They laughed. He thought about that. He thought about 4 months and an army of angelic killers and a city full of people who had no effective defense against them. He thought about the shadow soldiers on the roof above them and the system humming in his chest, cataloging every death signature in the city, and there was a lot of them. This place was saturated with the echo of violent ends. "Okay," he said. She blinked. "Okay. I'll help. Whatever you need. I don't know exactly how yet, and I need to understand this place better," but, he met her eyes. "You opened your door to a stranger who fell through your ceiling. That means something to me." Charlie looked at him for a long, quiet second. Something in her face shifted, that performative optimism she wore like armor dropped an inch, and underneath it was something real and tired and hopeful all at once. "You don't have to, I want to." He held her gaze. "Tell me about the city. Take me out there. I learn better by seeing." She lit up. Instantly, completely, like someone had thrown a switch. "Yes. Yes, okay, tomorrow morning, we can start with the main districts and then, she caught herself again. You should sleep first. You fell through a dimensional rift. I'll sleep, he agreed. She took the empty tray, said goodnight, and was halfway down the hall before she turned back. Izuku. He looked up. I'm really glad the rift put you here and not somewhere worse. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. She smiled, real, genuine, warm, and went. He sat on the edge of the bed and felt, for the first time since the implosion, something that wasn't urgency. It didn't last long. Vaggie appeared in his doorway at midnight. She didn't knock. She stepped in silently, which told him she'd been trained by people who were serious about silent entry, and stood with her arms crossed and her spear on her back and her expression set to the approximate warmth of a sharpened blade. You seem settled, she said. I'm adaptable. Charlie trusts people too fast. I know. She studied him. You're not a sinner. Your energy signature doesn't read like anything in hell. You're not an angel, you're definitely not a demon, and that shadow thing you do is, she searched for the word. Wrong, he offered. New, she said. Which is worse? She stepped forward, and she was taller than he'd realized, and her eyes up close were more complicated than the flat hostility he'd read downstairs. There was fear in there, and not fear of him. Fear of consequences. Fear of what happened to people she trusted. If you hurt her, she said, I don't care what army you have. I will end you. He didn't flinch. He met her gaze the same way he'd met it downstairs, no performance, no bravado. Just straight honesty. Someone once told me that the measure of a hero is whether they run toward trouble or away from it. Charlie's running toward something that everyone else thinks is impossible. I've only known her a few hours and I can already tell she's the most sincere person in this city. He paused. I don't hurt people like that. I protect them. Vaggie stared at him. The muscle in her jaw worked. She turned and walked out without another word. He counted that as a win. He was asleep 3 minutes later, shadow soldiers rotating guard shifts outside his window without needing to be told. Charlie took him out the next morning before most of the city was active, which in hell apparently meant just after the eternal twilight brightened from deep red to medium red. She was enthusiastic and informative without being exhausting about it, pointing out districts and overlord territories and the way power was distributed through hell's social structure while they walked, and he listened with his analyst brain running full speed and his senses extended through his shadow system, feeling the city. It felt like a place that had given up on itself. Not completely, there were pockets of real life, real community, real effort, but underneath everything was the knowledge of the extermination, sitting on the city's chest like a weight. People built things they half expected to lose. Relationships formed with the background hum of impermanence. He'd grown up in a city that had learned to live with villain attacks. He recognized the shape of it. They were 3 blocks from the hotel when the turf war started. It kicked off fast, a squad of demons in Valentino's colors clashing with a rival crew over a corner that both sides apparently claimed, and within 30 seconds the street was a brawl, and within a minute the first body hit the pavement. He felt it immediately, the shadow system lighting up at the death signature, cataloging it, offering the essence to him. He didn't take it. Not yet. He pulled Charlie back to the edge of the street, out of the immediate splash zone. This is pretty normal, she said apologetically. Valentino's people have been pushing south lately, and, the fight spilled toward them. One of Valentino's crew, big, extra set of arms, faced like a rock that had been angry for several decades, spotted Charlie and his eyes went wide with the specific calculation of someone who just realized he was looking at leverage. He moved fast. So did Izuku. He stepped between Charlie and the demon before the demon completed the reach, caught the massive arm by the wrist with both hands, and used the momentum of the demon's own lunge to redirect him, a hip throw that sent 600 pounds of demon slamming into the pavement hard enough to crack it. The demon hit face first, bounced, and lay there making a sound like a confused foghorn. Izuku straightened. The demon started getting up. He was going to need more than one throw. The shadow came off the ground fast and clean. The soldier rose from the demon's own shadow, a dark mirror of him, and planted one massive foot on the demon's back and held him down without any visible effort. The demon went still. The rest of the brawl had stopped. 30 demons, 2 rival crews, all staring at the shadow soldier holding their colleague face down in the pavement. Izuku looked at the enforcer. Felt the extraction pull. The demon was alive, just pinned, but the shadow soldier he'd raised from the ambient death energy of the guy who'd hit the pavement earlier, that was a different story. One shadow rose, kneeling, already part of his army. He could feel the second one waiting. He made a decision. Reached down, pulled the enforcer to his feet, met his eyes, and said flatly, "Walk away." The demon looked at the shadow soldier. Looked at Izuku. Looked at Charlie, who was watching with her arms crossed and an expression that somehow combined "I told you so" with genuine awe. Then he turned and walked away, and his crew went with him, and the rival crew dispersed in the other direction, and the street went from a 30-person brawl to just Izuku and Charlie standing on a cracked pavement with a shadow soldier beside them. Charlie stared at the shadow soldier. "You took his shadow," she said. "No, I took the shadow of the one who died in the fight. The enforcer I just pinned." He dismissed the soldier and watched it sink back into his. "I chose not to extract him." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because he was still alive." He started walking again, checking the direction toward the hotel. "There's a difference." She fell into step beside him and didn't say anything for half a block, and then, "That matters to you. Where you get them from?" "Yeah." Another half block. "Then, good." She said it simply, without additional commentary, and he understood that was Charlie's version of a significant statement. Word travels in hell the way fire travels in dry grass. By the time they got back to the hotel, Husk was watching the news on a small screen behind the bar with the volume up, and the footage, grainy, clearly taken on someone's phone equivalent, showed a green-haired human throwing a 600-pound demon with his bare hands before raising a shadow soldier. The cheerin' at the bottom read, "What is this? Shadow entity spotted in Pentagram City." "That was fast," Izuku said. "This is hell," Husk said. "There's nothing to do here but gossip." Angel dust dropped down from somewhere above, landing on the bar with the fluid grace of someone with extra limbs and absolutely no concept of personal space. "Okay, so you're already famous, big guy. How's it feel?" "Premature," Izuku said. "Love the humility. Very rare around here. Very attractive." Angel tilted his head. "So what's your deal? You actually a hero or is that a bit?" "It's not a bit." "Ha." Angel looked at him for a longer moment than the comedic delivery suggested. Something more serious flickered in 8 pink eyes. "They got those where you come from? Real ones?" "Yeah." "Must be nice," Angel said, and looked back at his nails, and the comedy was back in place, but Izuku caught what was underneath it. He filed that too. The message from Valentino's operation arrived at 3 in the afternoon, not politely. A demon in Valentino's livery walked up to the hotel front door and knocked, which was more courtesy than Izuku expected, and when Husk opened it the demon just smiled and said, "The boss heard about the thing with his enforcer this morning. He's sending people tonight to discuss it." "Discuss it how?" Husk asked. The demon's smile widened. "Violently." He left. Husk closed the door and turned. Everyone in the lobby looked at each other. "Okay," Izuku said. "How many people does Valentino typically send for something like this?" "Last time he was annoyed at an overlord who crossed him, he sent 40, Alastor said from his chair, where he had been reading something that definitely wasn't a newspaper. "Though I suspect he'll send more this time, given that you're a novelty." "How long have you been sitting there?" Charlie asked. Longer than you'd think. Izuku was already moving, upstairs, shadow soldiers rising from the floor as he went, 12 of them, then 20, pulling from the death energy that had been passively accumulating in his system since he arrived. Hell was like a power generator for his abilities. Every death, every echo of violence in this city, fed into the reserves. He'd been here less than 24 hours and he could feel how much stronger he already was compared to where he'd landed. He organized his soldiers in the hotel's front courtyard while the sun, or whatever passed for the sun here, dropped toward the horizon. Shadow Knights arranged in formation, heavy infantry at the front, faster runner class at the flanks. He walked the line checking each one, and Charlie appeared at his shoulder somewhere in the middle of his patrol, matching his pace. "You're calm," she said. "I'm not. I'm focused." He glanced at her. "You should stay inside." "No. Charlie, this is my hotel," she said, and her voice had an edge to it that surprised him, firm and real without any of the bright cheerfulness she wore on top. "And my city. And I'm Lucifer's daughter and I have been told to stand back and stay safe and let other people handle it my entire life." Her black horns flickered with heat. "I'm not doing that anymore." He looked at her for a moment. "Thought about arguing." "Didn't. Then stay close to me." "Gladly," she said, and the smile came back, warmer and slightly wicked, and he very carefully did not react to that. Valentino's crew arrived at 9:30. 12 of them, then 20, then the rest filed around the corner until there were 36 demons in the hotel's front street. Mix of grunt class and mid-tier fighters, all armed, one commander class leading them, a tall, scarlet-skinned demon with 4 arms and a face full of trophy kills marked in scars. The commander looked at the shadow soldiers lined across the courtyard entrance. Looked at Izuku standing at their center. Looked at Charlie beside him. "The boss wants the human. Just him. Hotel doesn't have to get involved." "I'm involved," Charlie said pleasantly. Izuku said nothing. He was reading the formation. The commander was their heavy hitter, the flankers were speed class, there were 2 in the back with ranged weapons. Standard assault pattern, designed for overwhelming a stationary position. They weren't expecting coordinated resistance. He gave the order. Not verbally. Through the shadow bond, the push of intent, the soldiers moved. The flanks split instantly, 12 shadow runners peeling left and right into the side streets, cutting off the ranged attackers' retreat and jamming the flankers' route. The heavy infantry drove straight down the center. Izuku went with them, not behind them, at the front, moving with his soldiers like a conductor who also plays first violin. The commander swung at him with all 4 arms in a sequence designed to overwhelm a single fighter. Izuku read it on the windup. He'd fought creatures with 4 times the limbs, and stepped inside the swing, took the glancing hit across the shoulder, which hurt. The commander was strong, converted the stumble into a pivot and drove a shadow-enhanced punch into the commander's midsection that lifted him off the ground. Shadow energy crackled around the impact. The commander hit a wall 12 feet away and left a dent. His soldiers were moving through the main cluster now, not killing but incapacitating, heavy shadow hands grabbing, pinning, throwing. Izuku wove through the chaos, picking out the fighters who were still mobile and putting them down personally, fast and economical, no wasted movement. Something came at him from the left, quick, low, too fast for his eye to catch cleanly. He started to turn. A spear intercepted it. Vaggie had come out of the hotel's side door without announcing herself, moving through the fight with the precise violence of someone who'd been trained to kill by people who were very serious about it. She put her spear through a demon's shoulder, drove him into the ground, stepped over him, and was already turning toward the next target. She fought like she'd been doing this her whole life, efficient, adaptable, always ahead of the next move. She slid in beside Izuku and they fell into step without planning it. He went right, she went left, their rhythms matching up like they drilled it. When a demon got inside his guard, she was there. When one flanked her, he pulled it with a shadow tendril and threw it into a wall. It took 4 minutes. At the end of 4 minutes, 36 demons were down, incapacitated, none dead. The commander was buried under 3 shadow knights, his arms pinned, his face pressed into the cobblestones. The street was quiet. Charlie had been in the middle of it, not beside Izuku, which he'd lost track of, and that was going to bother him later, but she'd dealt with the 2 runners who'd circled around the building, her hellfire appearing in her palms in a way that looked casual and was absolutely not. She walked back to the courtyard entrance brushing a scorch mark off her sleeve with the expression of someone who'd swatted a fly. "So," she said. "That happened." Izuku turned to the commander, still pinned. "Tell Valentino this is his one warning." "One warning," the commander repeated, muffled by cobblestones. "Tell him the hotel is under my protection now. Tell him to point his people somewhere else." He crouched down to make eye contact. "Tell him I have 500 more where these came from," he said, nodding at his shadow soldiers, which was a slight exaggeration currently but wouldn't be for much longer. The commander got the message. He did the extraction after, pulling shadow essence from the death energy that had pooled in the aftermath of the fight, the echoes of violent endings. He pulled 10 new soldiers. His army sat at 32 now. He could feel each one through the bond, a web of dark energy that radiated outward from him in all directions. Vaggie had a cut on her forearm that she was ignoring with the determination of someone who regularly ignored inconvenient things. He noticed it when they were walking back inside, spotted the angle that told him it had bled more than it looked. "Let me see that," he said. "It's fine." "Vaggie." She looked at him like he'd said something unreasonable, which from her perspective was probably fair, but she held out her arm with the specific body language of someone who was tolerating something rather than accepting it. He reached into his shadow, pulled a thin tendril, not a weapon, just energy, and let it run along the cut. Shadow energy wasn't healing magic. But the system had enough bioelectric application at this point that it could close surface wounds, speed clotting, numb the nerve endings. The cut closed. Not perfectly, not instantly, but it closed. Vaggie's breath caught, just slightly. He let go. Stepped back, giving her space. She looked at her arm. Looked at him. The expression on her face was doing several things at once, most of which she appeared to be actively suppressing. "Don't make it weird," she said. "Wasn't planning to." She turned and went inside, and he noticed she was moving carefully enough that she'd felt what that was, his touch through the shadow energy, and she was deciding what to do about it. He gave her time to decide. The hotel lobby had the specific energy of people who just watched something significant and were processing it in different ways. Angel Dust was loud and dramatic about it, Husk was quiet and less dismissive than usual, Nifty had apparently tried to sweep up the fight while it was happening and was now describing what she'd seen with manic enthusiasm. Alastor materialized beside Izuku near the bar with the timing of a stage magician, close enough that the static energy from his presence raised the hairs on Izuku's arms. "A word," Alastor said, pleasantly, in a way that was not a request. He followed the radio demon to the corner of the lobby, away from the others. Alastor turned and his smile was wide and layered and the eyes behind it were not smiling at all. "You're quite impressive," Alastor said. "For something so new." "Thanks. A compliment from me is worth rather more than that response suggests." His cane tapped the floor once. "I'll be direct, rare for me, so do appreciate it. I know every overlord, every power broker, every dangerous individual in this city. I know every deal that's been made and most of the secrets that underpin them." The smile didn't move. "And I would like to offer you my guidance. My connections. My considerable expertise in navigating Hell's social and political landscape." "In exchange for what?" Alastor's eyes focused with something that was almost appreciation. "Loyalty." Izuku looked at him. Looked at the cane. Looked at the way Alastor's shadow didn't quite match his movements, like it was moving on its own agenda. He thought about the way Charlie had said Alastor's name earlier, the specific tone, not afraid, but careful. The way Vaggie's hand had moved toward her weapon when she'd mentioned him. He thought about what he knew about deals. About the people in his world who'd offered power in exchange for something. He thought about All for One. No, he said. Alastor blinked. A real blink, not performative. Excuse me. I appreciate the offer. Genuinely, your knowledge of this place would be useful and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I don't make deals that involve my loyalty. I give that to people who earn it. He held Alastor's gaze. If you want to help because you actually want the hotel to succeed, I'm open to working with you. But not a deal. The lobby had gone quiet. The others were very deliberately not listening, which meant they were absolutely listening. Alastor was still for 3 full seconds. That, Izuku suspected, was unusual. Then the smile widened, and this time it reached his eyes, though what it reached was something complicated and ancient and not entirely human-readable. How extraordinary, Alastor said quietly. You're genuinely not afraid of me. I'm a little afraid of you, Izuku said honestly. You're enormously powerful and I don't understand your motivations, which makes you dangerous. But afraid enough to make a bad deal? No. Another pause. Interesting, Alastor said, finally. He tipped his head in something that wasn't quite a bow. Perhaps another time. He drifted back into his corner and picked up whatever he'd been reading before. Husk caught Izuku's eye from behind the bar and raised his glass 2 millimeters in what appeared to be a toast. Izuku accepted it. He went up to the roof later that night. He needed open sky, or whatever passed for it here, and space to think, and the roof had both, his shadow soldier's construction work having at least made it structurally sound even if it wasn't aesthetically repaired yet. He sat on the edge and looked out over Pentagram City. Millions of people. Millions of souls who hadn't been good enough for heaven and weren't evil enough for the deeper pits, just people, human people once, who'd ended up here and were trying to exist in a place that killed them on a schedule. He heard her before she sat down beside him. She wasn't trying to be quiet, Charlie didn't do quiet the way other people did, she was warm and present and her footsteps had a particular rhythm. She sat cross-legged beside him with 2 mugs of something hot and held one out. He took it. She looked out at the city with an expression that was different from her daytime energy, not the optimism she wore as a flag but something quieter and more fragile and real. I've been trying to do this for years, she said. The hotel. Making it work. And nobody takes it seriously. My dad thinks I'm idealistic. Heaven thinks I'm naive. Most of hell thinks I'm a joke. She wrapped both hands around her mug. And then you fell through my roof, and in one day you've done more to establish the hotel as something that matters than I've managed in. She stopped. You built it, he said. I just helped defend it. Still. He looked at her. She was picking at the handle of her mug and the small vulnerability of the gesture undid the rest of his professional distance because he recognized it, that particular thing people do when they're saying something that costs them. It's a good idea, he said. The hotel. Redemption as an alternative to extermination. In my world, I'd have called it a structural solution rather than a symptomatic one, and those are always harder to build but more effective in the long run. She looked at him sideways. That's a very analytical way to say you believe in it. I believe in it, he said simply, and left out the analysis. She smiled, and leaned slightly toward him, and he felt the warmth of her beside him in the red-lit night. Can I ask about your world, she said. What it's like. What you do there. So he told her. About heroes and villains, about One for All, about the people who'd shaped him, All Might, his mom, his classmates, his friends, and she listened with genuine attention, asking questions that cut right to the things that mattered rather than the spectacular details. She asked about why he'd become a hero, not about the powers. She asked about what it felt like to be trusted with something this big, not about the battles. He found himself talking more than he'd planned to. More than he usually did. When he stopped, not ran out of things to say but stopped because he realized he'd been talking for an hour, she was quiet for a moment. You really love them, she said. Your people. Yeah. Then we need to figure out how to get you home. She said it simply, firmly, like it was a priority she'd decided on and wasn't negotiating. Because they need you. He looked at her. The extermination is in 4 months. I know. I'm not leaving before then. She looked back at him, and her eyes were very bright and very warm, and he could feel the heat of her demon nature in the air between them, warm like a fireplace. Then we have 4 months, she said. To do something that matters. He reached over and took her hand. Not calculated, not deliberate, just the natural end of a movement that had been building since she'd helped him up off her lobby floor. Her fingers laced through his, easy and warm, and neither of them mentioned it. They just sat there on the roof of the Hazbin Hotel with Pentagram City lit up below them and held on. The message arrived at the hotel early the next morning, a sealed envelope, bone-white paper, written in handwriting that had the precise quality of someone who signed death warrants for a living. Carmilla Carmine. She'd heard about last night. She wanted a meeting. He left Charlie sleeping and went downstairs, and Vaggie was already up, which he was starting to think meant she slept very little, and she handed him the letter with an expression that said she'd read it and was trying to decide how dangerous it was. Carmilla's an overlord, she said. Angelic weapons. Powerful, smart, doesn't pick fights she doesn't win. That she's reaching out directly instead of through a proxy is significant, he said. Yeah. He looked at the letter. Looked at Vaggie. She was in a different set of clothes from last night, dark and fitted, hair freshly pinned, and she met his gaze straight on the way she always did, no deflection. Come with us, he said. You and Charlie. She nodded. Precise. No emotional commentary. But as she turned away, he caught the edge of her expression, and it wasn't nothing, the thing that briefly crossed her face before she shut it down. It was the look of someone who'd been included when they'd expected to be sidelined, and didn't know what to do with that yet. He let her have the moment. Outside, across the city, in a tower of screens and signals and electronic everything, Vox was watching the overnight footage on a dozen monitors simultaneously. Shadow soldiers. A one-sided fight. A human who'd taken Valentino's crew apart like it was a warm-up exercise. Velvet, he said. His voice modulator was doing something unsettling at the lower frequencies. Tell me we have better cameras near the hotel. Already on it, Velvet said without looking up from her tablet. And get Valentino on the line. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. He stared at the footage, specifically at the shadow soldiers, how they moved, how they responded, how they seemed to operate on a distributed intelligence centered on the green-haired human. He reached out a signal toward them on instinct, the way he reached out to any electronic system. Nothing. No signal. No frequency. No hook. He'd never touched something he couldn't broadcast through. Vox, said Velvet, looking up now with the expression she reserved for things that genuinely interested her. What is that thing? I don't know yet. He watched the footage loop again. But we need to either own it or destroy it before the next extermination. In the deepest shadow of the hotel, where the light from the hellfire chandeliers didn't quite reach, Alastor leaned against the wall and spoke softly into his staff. The frequency that carried his words went very deep, much deeper than radio, down through the rings and the layers to something that was listening. He refused a deal, Alastor said. Cleanly. Without ego. A pause. He's growing quickly. If you intend to make your move, I'd recommend sooner rather than. The frequency that came back wasn't words. It was pressure. Old, enormous, patient pressure, the kind that had been building since before hell had its current shape. Alastor's smile stayed in place, as it always did, but his hands tightened slightly on his staff. Yes, he said quietly. I understand. He straightened. Walked back into the hotel. The shadow soldiers on patrol duty tracked him as he passed, and he tracked them back, and between them, the radio demon and the shadow monarch's army, there was an understanding that was not yet peaceful and not yet war. Not yet. Chapter 2, Sovereign of Shadows. Carmilla Carmine's mansion sat on the edge of the upper district like it owned the neighborhood, which it did, technically, because Carmilla owned most of what surrounded it through a network of shell agreements and territorial claims that had been accumulating since before most current overlords had died and ended up in hell. The building was tall, dark, and precise, no excess, no showmanship, every detail functional and deliberate. It suited her. The gates opened when they arrived, which meant they'd been watched from a distance, which meant Carmilla's security was better than it looked. Izuku clocked 4 sightlines on the way in and filed them. Charlie walked beside him with her hands clasped behind her back, doing her best diplomatic calm, which was genuine and slightly too enthusiastic to be fully convincing. Vaggie walked on his other side, spear on her back, eyes moving in a pattern that told him she was running threat assessments on everything including the garden statues. "She's not going to try anything," Charlie said, reading Vaggie's expression with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for years. "Carmilla is political, not impulsive." "Everyone's political until they're not," Vaggie said. "That's deeply cynical." "That's hell, babe." The front doors opened before they reached them and a demon in sharp-cut staff clothing led them through a foyer that had exactly 3 pieces of art on the walls, all of them depicting battles, and into a sitting room that smelled like gunmetal and expensive tea. Carmilla Carmine stood at the window with her back to them. She was tall, silver-haired, dressed in white and gold with the posture of someone who had never once in her existence slouched. When she turned, her face was angular and composed and her eyes were the particular kind of calm that comes from never being surprised by anything because you've already planned for it. She looked at Izuku for a long, measuring moment. He looked back. "You're younger than the footage suggested," she said. "People say that. And less impressive in person." "A beat. That's a compliment. Impressive people in hell are usually trying to look impressive." "You're not trying at all." Charlie brightened immediately. "That's exactly what Miss Morningstar," Carmilla said, not unkindly. "I appreciate your enthusiasm. Please sit down." They sat. A staff member appeared with tea, which Husk would have opinions about, and Carmilla took her seat across from them with the unhurried movements of someone conducting a meeting she'd already decided the outcome of. "The enforcer you stopped," she said to Izuku. "Valentino's people identified him as Breck, mid-tier muscle, nothing special. But the way you stopped him, and more importantly what you did after." She set her cup down. "You extracted a shadow from a death signature and raised it as a functional soldier. In real time. On a public street." "Yes. I've been in hell for 400 years, Carmilla said. "I have never seen that." "Neither has anyone else," Vaggie said. Carmilla's eyes moved to Vaggie briefly, a flicker of recognition, something filed and set aside, and back to Izuku. "My business involves angelic weapons. The only things in existence capable of permanently ending a demon's existence. I deal in them because power in hell is maintained through the credible threat of true death. Everyone who matters here understands that the extermination exists because heaven has a monopoly on the tools to end us permanently." She folded her hands. "Your shadow extraction. It doesn't kill them permanently," Izuku said. "The sinner's essence is, absorbed, changed. They become soldiers. Whether their consciousness persists in any meaningful way, I don't know. I'm still working on understanding the full mechanics. But they're gone from hell's population." "Yes. And you could potentially do this to an exorcist." The room got very quiet. Charlie's cup paused halfway to her mouth. Vaggie went still in the specific way of someone who just heard something significant and was deciding whether to be alarmed or excited. "Theoretically," Izuku said carefully. "I haven't fought one. I don't know if angelic essence responds the same way to shadow extraction as demonic essence. But the system is based on absorbing combat power from defeated opponents. If I defeat an exorcist, the extermination," Carmilla said, "uses roughly 300 exorcists per cycle. If each of those became one of your soldiers. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That's a big if, Vaggie said. Everything worth doing is, Carmilla said. She looked at Izuku again, and this time the measuring quality had shifted into something more direct. I want an alliance. Not a deal. I know better than to propose deals to someone who refused Alastor. Mutual defense, mutual information sharing, mutual interest in surviving the next extermination. What do you bring to it? Vaggie asked. Arsenal. My weapons cache includes 400 angelic blades, 200 pieces of angelic armor, and enough ranged angelic weaponry to outfit a small army. A pause. And 40 years of intelligence on Heaven's extermination protocols, command structures, and tactical patterns. Izuku looked at Charlie. Charlie looked at him. The conversation happened in about 2 seconds without words. She raised her eyebrows, he gave a small nod, she gave a slightly larger nod back. There's something you need to know first, Izuku said, turning back to Carmilla. My information from last night, the scout. Carmilla's eyes sharpened. What scout? One exorcist. High altitude, surveillance pattern, focused on the hotel district. He held her gaze. The extermination timeline has moved. I don't know by how much, but they're watching us specifically. Carmilla was quiet for 3 seconds. Long, for her. Because of you. Probably. A human wielding death's power in hell. She said it flatly, working through implications. Heaven would view that as a disruption of fundamental order. Yeah. She stood, walked back to the window, and looked out over the city with her hands clasped behind her back. The posture made her look like someone doing math in their head with very high stakes. 3 months, she said finally. I was told 3 months to the next extermination. If they've moved it up, we work with what we have, Izuku said. Whatever the timeline, the answer is the same. Build the defense. Train the people. Make the hotel impossible to ignore as a legitimate alternative to extermination. He paused. And when the extermination comes, meet it. Carmilla turned back. She looked at him with something that wasn't quite respect yet but was in the same direction. You make it sound simple. It's not, he said. But complicated problems still have a first step. She studied him for another moment, then extended her hand. Not the ceremonial gesture of an overlord deal, just a handshake, clean and direct, the way people sealed agreements between equals. He shook it. Information first, she said, sitting back down, already in logistics mode. What do you know about the V's? They were in that meeting room for 2 hours. By the end of it, Izuku had a working map of Hell's power structure, a preliminary defensive plan that incorporated Carmilla's weapons cache, and a clearer picture of exactly how dangerous the next few weeks were going to be. Carmilla gave information with the precision of someone who'd curated it for decades, efficient and zero waste. When they stood to leave, she walked them to the door herself, unusual, Vaggie's slight shift told him, for an overlord. At the door, she said to Izuku quietly, while Charlie was talking to a staff member and Vaggie was examining the garden sightlines, my daughters. Odette and Clara. They're not fighters. I know, he said, though he didn't, not specifically. If it comes to it, they're covered, he said. She looked at him. Something softened, very briefly, in the angular precision of her face, and she said nothing else. She didn't need to. The message had been delivered and received and they both understood the weight of it. He thought about Carmilla's daughters on the walk back. About the particular shape of that kind of love, protecting something you built from scratch in a world that wanted to take it from you. He understood that feeling in his bones. His whole career had been about protecting people who deserved better than what the world was giving them. It just turned out that principle worked in hell too. She likes you, Charlie said. She's assessing me. Carmilla Carmine doesn't personally walk guests to her door, Charlie said patiently. She sent you a personal letter instead of going through a broker. She shook your hand. She ticked these things off on her fingers. For Carmilla, that's basically a declaration of devotion. Charlie, Vaggie said. I'm just saying, you're matchmaking. I'm observing. Vaggie muttered something under her breath and Izuku caught the words, impossible woman, and, every single time, and filed them affectionately. They were halfway back to the hotel when his shadow system lit up. Not the passive accumulation he'd been feeling all morning, the background hum of Hell's death energy feeding into his reserves. This was a sharp, electronic feeling spike, like someone had just aimed a camera at him and he'd felt the lens. He stopped walking. Charlie and Vaggie stopped with him. Something's wrong, he said. Vaggie's spear was in her hand before he finished the sentence. Charlie's hands had hellfire in them a half-second later, casual and ready, the way she carried it when she decided something was worth taking seriously. He looked up. Nothing visible in the sky. He looked at the buildings surrounding them, 3-story commercial structures, signage, plenty of windows. He extended his shadow sense, letting it run along the ground and up the walls in thin threads. There. High up on the corner building, angled down, the specific electromagnetic signature of a surveillance camera. But it wasn't a static camera, it was tracking him. Moving to follow his position. We're being filmed, he said. Vox. Already? Charlie said. He's had people watching the hotel since yesterday. I just didn't catch it until we were away from familiar territory. He thought about the camera. Thought about what Carmilla had said about the V's, about Vox's influence network, about the way information moved in Hell. He pulled one shadow soldier up from the street, runner class, fast and thin, and sent it up the building wall in 3 seconds flat. The camera stopped moving. A moment later, the soldier came back down and the camera was no longer pointing at anything useful. He did the same to 3 more he'd identified in adjacent sightlines. Then he kept walking, because there was nothing to be gained from standing around looking concerned. He's been watching us since the fight last night, Izuku said. That means he's building a file on me, what I can do, how I do it, what my patterns are. He'll use it to either discredit us publicly or plan a targeted attack. Vox doesn't usually do direct attacks, Charlie said. He controls the narrative. Makes people think what he wants them to think. He's going to try to make Hell afraid of you, Vaggie said bluntly. Tell them you're dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to everyone. Turn public opinion against the hotel before the extermination even starts. Izuku thought about that. Then we need to be seen clearly before he gets to define what he wants people to see. How? Charlie asked. He had an idea. He turned it over, checked it from different angles. It was direct, which was usually the right call when the problem was about perception. Tomorrow, he said. I need to see Vox directly. Vaggie and Charlie both looked at him. Just to talk, he said. With Vox, Vaggie said. Yes. The overlord whose entire power structure is built on controlling information and who already sees you as a threat. Yes. A beat. I'm coming, Vaggie said. And me, said Charlie. No, he said, to both of them. They started objecting simultaneously, overlapping, and he waited them out before continuing, because if I bring you both, it looks like I need backup, which tells Vox I'm uncertain about my position. I need to walk in alone. He looked at Charlie specifically. Not because you can't handle it. Because I need him to see me without context and make his own read. Vox is good at reading what people show him. I want to control what he sees. Charlie subsided, though she clearly didn't love it. Vaggie held his gaze for an extra second, doing her own assessment. Then she nodded. One sharp, precise nod that said she'd followed the logic and agreed with it even if she didn't like the conclusion. They got back to the hotel to find Alastor in the lobby, which was normal, and angel dust on the bar in a crisis, which was less normal. He was holding a magazine with the hotel's picture on the cover, a gossip publication by the look of it, and his expression was doing something complicated between anger and resignation. Izuku took the magazine. The cover read, Hazbin Hotel, Hell's Most Dangerous New Resident. Below it was a still from last night's fight footage, him in the middle of his shadow soldiers, and the framing made it look, deliberately, like a warlord commanding an occupation force. That's Vox's network, Charlie said, looking over his shoulder, her voice going tight. He must have published it this morning. He works fast, Izuku said. He's been waiting for an excuse, Vaggie said. The hotel has always been his punchline. Now he's making it his threat narrative. Izuku put the magazine down. Tomorrow, he said again, calmly. He spent the rest of the day on something that mattered more immediately than Vox, going over defense logistics with the shadow soldiers, testing their response times, pushing the bonds to see how far he could extend his command radius in Hell's specific energy environment. He learned things. In Hell, his range was significantly longer than it had been in his world. The ambient death energy acted like a signal booster for the shadow system. He could command soldiers nearly 2 kilometers away with full clarity. He also learned that Hell's deeper energy, the kind that came from older deaths, more powerful entities, was richer source material. The soldier he'd raised from the Valentino Enforcer's ambient signature was strong but standard class. If he could extract from something significantly more powerful, the result would be proportionally stronger. He filed that and waited. Husk found him at the bar around midnight, which had become a pattern he suspected Husk had engineered by ensuring there was always something worth drinking available at that hour. You're thinking loud, Husk said, pouring something without being asked. Is that a real thing here? In Hell everything's a real thing. Husk leaned on the bar. He had the face of a demon who'd been a lot of things before this and had opinions about most of them. Carmilla's alliance. That's good. You know her. Knew her when she first got here. Long time ago. He drank. She's good people. Which in Hell means she's a specific kind of ruthless that's actually principled underneath. Yeah, Izuku said. I got that. Husk looked at him sideways. Charlie likes you. I know. Vaggie's trying not to. I know. You're not going to do anything stupid about either of those things. Izuku looked at his glass. I'm going to try not to. Husk made a sound that was not approval and not disapproval but lived somewhere in between, the sound of someone who'd seen a lot of situations and had learned the difference between warning people and wasting breath. Good enough, he said, and poured another round. Vox's tower was in the entertainment district, black glass and broadcast signals and the kind of architectural arrogance that announced itself from 3 blocks away. Izuku walked up to the front entrance the next morning with his hands in his pockets and his shadow soldiers running quiet, not visible, not raised, but ready in the substrate of his shadow like coiled things. The security system at the entrance was electronic. Every camera, every sensor, every door lock, all networked, all feeding into Vox's central system. He felt them reaching for him the moment he got within range, trying to establish a read on his signature, and finding nothing. Shadow energy wasn't electromagnetic. It wasn't biological in any way the sensors understood. To Vox's network, he was a blind spot with shoes. The door opened anyway. Vox knew he was here. The interior was screens. Floor to ceiling, every wall, every surface that wasn't a door or a piece of furniture, all live feeds, all running simultaneously, a cascading wall of information that would have been overwhelming to most people and was clearly designed to be. He walked through it with his eyes forward, not letting any screen anchor his attention, and took the elevator when it opened without needing to be called. Vox's office was at the top. He was standing behind his desk when Izuku walked in, which meant he'd chosen to receive him standing, a power positioning choice that said he wanted height advantage, wanted to look down at a visitor. He was exactly what the footage had suggested, a screen for a head, suit, the particular quality of someone who'd built their power on being seen and had forgotten there was a version of presence that didn't need cameras. Well, Vox said. His voice modulator made his words land with a slight delay, like broadcast signal. You just walked past 15 security checkpoints. Your cameras couldn't track me, Izuku said. Your electronic locks didn't register my shadow energy. Your guards didn't know I was in the building until I was already at the elevator. He sat down in one of the chairs across from Vox's desk without being invited to. I came to talk. Not to demonstrate anything. I just figured you should know that everything I just described is true whether I'm here in good faith or not. Vox's screen face flickered. Static at the edges. You're telling me my security failed. I'm telling you that your security works on things it can measure. I'm outside what you can measure. He kept his voice flat, non-threatening, informational. Which is why I'm here talking instead of letting you build a picture of me from incomplete footage. Vox moved to sit, slowly, and the screen face cleared slightly. You saw the magazine. You published it fast. Speed is the point. Vox leaned back. Do you know what I do, Midoriya? I control narrative. In hell, information is as powerful as angelic steel. What people believe about you shapes what they do about you. The magazine, the broadcast, the framing of last night's footage, was designed to make hell afraid of me before they could form their own opinion. Izuku held his gaze, or what passed for gaze on a screen face. I know. I came here to offer you a different frame. Something shifted in Vox's posture. Curiosity, genuine, underneath the defensive calculation. You're not here to threaten me. No. Or to negotiate terms. No. Then what? I'm here to tell you that the extermination is coming early. That heaven is mobilizing more exorcists than previous cycles. That what kills demons in the extermination doesn't care about your media empire or your broadcast network or your influence over hell's population. He met the screen face steadily. I'm building something at the hotel that can actually stop it. You can spend the next few months trying to undermine it, or you can get out of the way. The room was very quiet. Vox's screen flickered through several frequencies. You're serious. I'm always serious. You think you can stop the extermination? I think we have a better chance than hell has ever had, Izuku said. Which was previously zero. Vox stared at him, and without the ability to read a face, Izuku read the body, the micro-shifts of posture, the way Vox's hands sat on the desk. The static at the screen's edges was doing something interesting. He was afraid. Not of Izuku specifically, or not only of Izuku, afraid of the extermination in a way he usually kept buried under layers of control and bravado. Every demon in hell was afraid of the extermination. Vox just had more defenses around it. The hotel, Vox said finally, carefully. Charlie's little project. Charlie's project is the only political mechanism that exists to challenge heaven's justification for the extermination, Izuku said. Redemption as an alternative. If it works, heaven loses the moral ground they use to authorize it. He paused. You want to control hell's narrative. Right now the most important narrative in hell is whether the extermination can be stopped. Get behind the right side of that story. He stood. Vox didn't say anything. His screen cycled through colors that might have been emotional processing and might have been mechanical response, Izuku couldn't be sure. At the door, Izuku stopped without turning. Take down the magazine piece. He left. He didn't know if it would work. Vox was calculating and self-interested, and the only direction he reliably moved was toward increased personal power. But he'd seen the fear underneath the performance, and fear was honest in a way that ambition usually wasn't. Sometimes honest was enough to work with. He walked back through Vox's lobby, past screens that tracked him from cameras they couldn't actually capture, and out into the city. Alastor's suggestion came 2 days later, delivered with his customary theatrical indirection, framed as a casual observation rather than a directive, which meant he'd been thinking about it for significantly longer than casual. Rosie, he said, appearing beside Izuku during a shadow soldier training exercise in the hotel's back courtyard, is someone you should meet. Izuku kept his eyes on the soldiers. He was running them through coordinated response drills, testing how fast they could adapt to changing signals. Rosie who? Rosie of Cannibal Town. Alastor's smile was present and unhelpful. An overlord. Quite different from Carmilla in style, though similarly serious in substance. She has resources and connections and a particularly unique perspective on Hell's social ecosystem. He paused. She's also one of my oldest friends, which I mention purely for context. And you're suggesting the meeting because you want me to go, or because you want to see what happens when I do? The smile widened fractionally. Can't it be both? Izuku signaled his soldiers to hold position and turned to look at Alastor properly. The radio demon had been doing this since they'd met, orbiting him, testing, suggesting, creating situations and then watching how he navigated them. It was strategic, thorough, and he was learning from it. He just needed to figure out exactly what information Alastor was collecting and for what purpose. I'll go, Izuku said. And I'll take your introduction. But I'm going to need you to tell me something real in return. Alastor's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted slightly, like a transmission being tuned. Real, he repeated. Tell me something true. About yourself or about what you want. Not a performance. He held Alastor's gaze. I deal straight and I expect the same. You can be theatrical about it, that's fine, but it has to be actual information. A long pause. Alastor's cane tapped the ground once. I am, Alastor said, measured, each word apparently costing something, not entirely free to act in whatever manner I choose. He smiled as he said it, but the smile was doing something different, carrying weight instead of deflecting it. There are constraints on my movements and my loyalties. Commitments made long ago that shape what I can and cannot do now. It was enough. Not everything, but it was real, and Izuku recognized the difference between evasion and disclosure under difficult circumstances. Thank you, he said simply. Something moved through Alastor's expression that was gone before he could name it. Rosie will receive you warmly, he said. She receives everyone warmly. Try not to let that fool you into thinking warmth and danger are mutually exclusive. I know they're not, Izuku said. He went to Cannibal Town the next morning with a small escort of shadow soldiers, visible but not aggressive, because showing up with no soldiers at an overlord's territory would read as either reckless confidence or naivety, and showing up with 100 would read as aggression. 4 was respectful. 4 said he was taking the meeting seriously without making it a military visit. Cannibal Town was its own thing entirely. It smelled like a butcher's shop and a flower market had a collision and neither party was upset about the result. The buildings were painted in warm colors, the residents greeted each other in the street with genuine familiarity, and the thing they all had in common was that they were politely, thoroughly dangerous in a way that felt almost cozy. A demon waved at him from a bakery window holding something he chose not to identify. Another tipped a very nice hat. Rosie's shop was at the center, sweet-fronted, candy-striped, with a sign in beautiful handwriting and a door that opened before he reached it. She was exactly what he hadn't expected, which he suspected was the point. Small, elegant, pale as bone, dressed in Victorian black and white with a smile that was genuinely delighted rather than predatory. She had the energy of a favorite aunt who happened to run an empire of organized chaos, and she looked at him the way most people looked at something they'd read about and were pleased to find lived up to the description. "Oh, you're real," she said, taking both his hands before he had a chance to introduce himself. Alastor didn't exaggerate for once. Come in, come in." He came in. The interior of the shop was warm and full and he didn't look too closely at the merchandise. She sat him down at a small table set for tea, poured without asking, and settled across from him with the particular grace of someone who had never in their existence been awkward about anything. "Now," she said. "Show me." He raised an eyebrow. "The soldiers, dear." Alastor described them, but descriptions are never sufficient for something truly new. He summoned 4 from the ambient energy in the shop, small combat class, mobile and precise, and had them run a brief drill. Rosie watched with the expression she might have worn at a very good theater performance, engaged, delighted, appreciative. "Remarkable," she said, when he dismissed them. "They retain the combat intelligence of the source. And the physical parameters. A faster demon makes a faster soldier. A stronger one makes a stronger one," she finished. "And they respond to your command exclusively?" "To me, yes. Though I'm working on whether I can designate secondary commanders. It's possible in theory." She refilled his tea with the precision of someone who took hospitality seriously as a philosophical position. "Tell me about your world." So he did, for the second time in a week, but differently than he'd told Charlie. Charlie had asked about the emotional landscape, the people, the losses, the reasons. Rosie asked about the mechanics, how power worked, how society organized itself around people with abilities, how the hero system functioned. She was analytical underneath the warmth, and she was building a model of him from the information, which he understood and accepted because he was doing the same to her. When he got to the Shadow Monarch system, how he'd absorbed it, how it worked, the full scope of what he could do, she sat back and looked at him with something that was very close to awe. "You can extract the essence of any entity you defeat," she said. "Any entity that dies within my domain or that I personally defeat, yes. Hell's energy environment makes the range significantly longer than my home dimension. So if you were to face, hypothetically," she stopped. Smiled. "No. Let me ask directly. An exorcist? I don't know yet. Angelically natured essence might respond differently. I'd need to test it." He paused. "I'm planning to." Rosie looked at him for a long, warm moment. "You're planning to fight an exorcist?" "Deliberately. I'm planning to stop the extermination," he said. "That might require it." She reached across the table and patted his hand. The gesture was completely genuine and absolutely unexpected, and somehow more grounding than anything that had happened to him since arriving in hell. "You wonderful boy," she said. "I've been here for centuries and I have never once met anyone who walked into Cannibal Town planning to fight heaven." She tilted her head. "What do you need from me?" "Your territory as a secondary supply and staging point for the hotel's defense network. Your people as an auxiliary force if it comes to a full military engagement." He held her gaze. "And your advice? You've been here longer than almost anyone, and advice from someone who knows this world and isn't angling for something in the immediate term is more valuable than almost anything else I could ask for." She was quiet, looking at him with that warm, assessing gaze. "And what do I get?" she asked, not harshly, just genuinely. "I solve your encroachment problem." "A beat." "I have several." "The one run by Rathius," he said. "Carmilla's intelligence had covered it. He's been pushing into your northern territory for 6 months. Backed by Vox's network and Valentino's logistics." Rosie's expression settled into something that was still warm but had edges now. "Yes," she said. "That one. Let me handle it." She poured her own tea with steady hands and considered. "You're younger than anything I've dealt with," she said finally. "But older than you look. And genuine in a way that's—" She searched for the word. "Unprecedented, in my experience. I've been told." "Then yes," she said. "We have an accord." She smiled, and it was the real one, the one underneath the performance. "Though I should warn you, if you're extraordinary enough to solve my Rathius problem, I'm going to be dreadfully reluctant to let you go." He didn't know exactly what she meant by that and decided that was probably fine for now. Rathius came the next day, as if the universe had decided to accommodate his schedule. He came with 100 soldiers, sinner demons, mid-tier mostly, a few heavy class at the front, and he came from the north where his territory abutted Rosie's, rolling down the main street of Cannibal Town with the energy of someone who'd been putting this off and had finally decided it was time. He was enormous, 6 arms, body built like a building that had developed ambitions, carrying a weapon that was essentially a building support beam with runes carved into it. Rosie watched from her shop doorway with a cup of tea. Izuku met them in the street with 50 shadow soldiers. Not all 50 at once, he staged them, heavy infantry in a line across the road, runners along the rooftops on both sides, 3 commander class at his shoulders. He stood at the center of the line and watched Rathius's force come down the street and stop when they saw what was waiting. Rathius looked at the shadow soldiers. Looked at Izuku. His 6 arms spread in a posture that was either challenge or confusion and might have been both. "What is this?" Rathius said. "This is Rosie's territory," Izuku said. "You're not welcome here." "I don't know you," Rathius said. "You will." Rathius made a decision, the wrong one, but a decisive one, which Izuku could at least respect, and charged. He was fast for something his size. All 6 arms swinging in a sequence designed to overwhelm by sheer coverage, the rune-carved beam coming in at an angle that would have leveled a building. Izuku read the pattern on the wind-up, stepped left, let the swing carry Rathius's weight past him, and hit him with a shadow-enhanced punch to the side that was every ounce of power he had behind it. Shadow energy crackled outward from the impact like black lightning. Rathius stumbled, didn't fall, strong enough to absorb even that, and spun with 3 arms swinging simultaneously at different heights. Izuku took one hit across the chest. It was like getting hit by a car, and he went back 3 steps, and his shadow armor absorbed most of it but not all, and he felt it. Good. Pain meant information. He understood Rathius's strength now. He shadow-stepped, vanishing into his own shadow and reappearing behind Rathius in the same motion, and hit the back of Rathius's knee with a focused shadow strike. The leg folded. Rathius went down on one knee with an impact that cracked the street beneath it. "Stay down," Izuku said. Rathius got up. The shadow soldiers hit his forces simultaneously, the line in front, the runners from above, a pincer that cut Rathius's 100 soldiers into 3 isolated groups and then methodically incapacitated each group before they could regroup. It was over in 90 seconds. Rathius was still fighting. 5 arms now, one hanging at an angle that told the story of the earlier strikes, the beam weapon cracking under the punishment it had taken. He was powerful and he was angry and he was losing, and all 3 of those things were making him harder to deal with rather than easier. Izuku activated the domain. It expanded outward from him in a circle, not slow, fast, a pulse of shadow energy that spread 30 meters in every direction and made the air within it heavy with dark power. Within the domain, his soldiers moved faster, hit harder, recovered faster from damage. Outside forces felt the drag of it, movement becoming slightly harder, perception slightly slower. Rathius felt it immediately, the change in the air, the way his limbs responded less readily. He swung and Izuku wasn't where he'd expected him to be. Izuku came in from below, both hands locked together, full force, shadow energy wrapped around his arms like armor and weapon both, and hit Rathius in the chest with everything. Rathius went up. Then came down. The street took most of the impact and expressed strong opinions about it. Izuku stood over him, breathing hard, domain still active. Rathius was down, not dead, but done. His soldiers had stopped fighting. The shadow soldiers held them in place. He reached for the extraction. Rathius's essence was enormous. Commander class, potentially higher. The shadow that rose from the defeated overlord was the biggest soldier Izuku had raised yet, massive, dark, carrying the raw power of something that had been an overlord. It straightened and looked at him and waited. The shadow army jumped in quality in an instant. Having a commander-class soldier didn't just add one unit, it reorganized the network, the stronger essence acting as a relay point for Izuku's commands, making the whole system more responsive. He dismissed the domain. Rosie applauded from her doorway. Not ironically, genuinely, with real pleasure, setting her teacup down to clap properly. Magnificent, she said, walking over. She looked at the commander-class shadow soldier and then at Izuku, and her expression was warm and specific, and he'd seen that expression before, recently, on 2 other people. She reached up and patted his cheek with a light, unhurried hand. "Oh darling," she said. "You're absolutely wonderful." He didn't quite know what to do with that. His face made a decision without his input. She laughed, bright and genuine, and tucked her hand through his arm and walked him back toward her shop. "I'll have Cannibal Town's Northern Guard route re-established by tomorrow," she said. "And I'll begin moving my stores toward your defensive perimeter coordinates." She glanced at him sideways. "I've decided I'm keeping you. You're, not forever. Just," she smiled. "Indefinitely." He processed this on the walk back to the hotel and arrived at a conclusion that was somewhat overwhelming and entirely genuine. Hell had given him things his world hadn't expected him to need, and people who saw him clearly for reasons that had nothing to do with inherited power or social expectation, and he was not sure how to account for that. Charlie was waiting on the hotel steps. Not pacing, she wasn't a pacer, she was a person who found a fixed point and radiated energy from it. She saw him from halfway down the block and her whole face changed, the specific expression of someone who'd been pretending not to worry and was relieved to be done pretending. "You're back," she said. "I said I would be. You took on an overlord." "I did." She crossed her arms. "Alone. With 50 shadow soldiers." She looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who was building up to something. Then she grabbed the front of his jacket, pulled him forward, and kissed him, and it was exactly like her, warm and sudden and completely sincere, no calculation behind it, just what she felt made direct contact with what she did. He was still for half a second from pure surprise, and then he kissed her back and her hands moved from his jacket to his shoulders and his went to her waist, and they stood on the hotel steps kissing like neither of them had anywhere more important to be. When they broke apart, her face was doing something he'd never seen it do before, genuinely flushed, a deep rose color spreading across her cheeks that worked its way up to the tips of her small horns, and she was smiling with her whole face in a way that didn't have any performance in it at all. "I've been wanting to do that," she said. "Okay," he said, which was not what his brain had planned to say and was apparently all it could produce. She laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they stood there for a moment on the front steps of the Hazbin Hotel with the Pentagram City skyline doing its eternal red twilight thing behind them. "Rosie agreed?" Charlie asked. "Full alliance. She's moving supplies toward the defense perimeter." "And Rathius?" "Not a problem anymore." "And you?" She tilted her head to look up at him. "Are you okay?" He thought about the honest answer, which was, he hurt from the Rathius fight in 3 places and he was operating in a world he didn't fully understand with a power he was still learning and people he was responsible for and a clock counting down to an extermination. He thought about all of that. "Better than okay," he said, which was also honest. She squeezed his arm and they went inside. Vaggie was at the top of the stairs. She had the expression of someone who'd seen the entire thing from the staircase window and was working out how she felt about it with the intensity of someone solving a math problem they didn't fully understand. She met Izuku's eyes when he reached the top, and then Charlie's, and then looked away. "Good meeting," she said. "Yes," Charlie said brightly. "Great." Vaggie turned. "Dinner's ready." She walked toward the kitchen, precise and controlled, and Izuku watched her go and felt the particular tension of someone in motion that they couldn't quite read yet, not hostility, but something more complicated, something that had edges in multiple directions. He found her on the hotel roof that night at a time that had become quietly habitual for both of them, though neither had explicitly made it so. She was standing at the edge looking out at the city with her spear propped against the low wall beside her, and she didn't look surprised when he came through the roof access door. "I saw you and Charlie," she said, not accusatory, just direct in the way she did everything. "I know you did." She was quiet for a moment. "Charlie and I have been together for," she stopped. Start it again differently. What we have isn't something that fits categories easily. I know, he said again. He came to stand beside her at the edge, leaving space, not crowding her. I'm not trying to change what you and Charlie have. I know you're not. She picked up her spear and turned it in her hands, which wasn't a threat gesture, just something to do with her hands when she was processing something. That's the problem. If you were, I'd know how to deal with it. She looked at him. She stopped again. Just what? She looked back at the city. Real, she said. Annoyingly, inconveniently real, when everything in hell is either calculated or desperate. She made a small, frustrated sound. I don't know what to do with that. He let that sit without trying to fill the space around it. After a moment, he said, Can I tell you something? She glanced at him. I was cast out of something once too. He kept his voice even. Not the way you were. I know what happened to you. Alastor mentioned the exorcist origins without details and I filled some gaps. You don't have to confirm anything. But I know what it's like to have a purpose you were given and then lose the context that made it make sense. He paused. The heroism doesn't go away when the system does. You're still what you were. Just without the label. She was very still. The mercy you showed that child, he said. The one that got you cast out. That was a heroic act. Everything you've done since, he stopped. Reconsidered. You're the most capable fighter I've worked alongside in a long time. You protect Charlie with everything you have. You looked out for the hotel the night I arrived before you had any reason to trust me. He met her eyes when she turned toward him. I don't know what heaven calls that. But I know what I call it. Vaggie's jaw worked. Something moved through her face, quick and complicated, and she turned away again, and her hands on the spear were very careful. Then she turned back and grabbed his shirt with one hand and kissed him. It was not like Charlie's kiss. Charlie kissed him like she meant it, open and warm and present. Vaggie kissed him like she'd made a decision after a long argument with herself and was implementing it with everything she had, fierce and exact and full of everything she'd been holding at arm's length, and his hand went to her jaw by instinct and she made a sound against his mouth that was almost anger and definitely not. When she pulled back she was shaking. Just slightly. Her hand was still in his shirt. If you tell anyone I did that, I won't, he said. Good. She released his shirt. Straightened. Thank you, she said, in a voice that was about half its normal volume and carrying about 3 times its normal weight. She picked up her spear and walked toward the roof access door. Stopped with her hand on it. Izuku. He looked up. You're going to get hurt doing this. The extermination, the overlords, whatever Alastor's running underneath all of this. You're going to take real damage and she stopped. I hate that. I know, he said. I'll try not to. Try harder than that, she said, and went inside. He stood on the roof for a while after, the city below him and the red sky above, and thought about what he'd been given here, in this impossible place. What he'd been trusted with. He thought about his world, his mom, his classmates, All Might's specific tired hopeful face, and he thought about Charlie's kiss on the hotel steps and Vaggie's kiss on this roof and Carmilla's handshake and Rosie's hand on his cheek, and he thought about 200 shadow soldiers spread through Pentagram City like roots, and a hotel that had started to mean something. He thought, I'll come back to you. All of you, both worlds. I'll come back. It was the only promise worth making. The next morning Charlie sat them both down. It was the most Charlie thing she'd ever done. She waited until they were all 3 in the kitchen over coffee, waited until everyone was awake enough to be coherent, and then she looked at both of them with an expression that was determined and slightly terrified and completely genuine and said, Can we talk about this? Vaggie's cup paused. Izuku kept his face neutral. Because, Charlie continued, I kissed Izuku on the steps. And Vaggie, she looked at Vaggie. I saw you come in from the roof last night and your face was doing a thing. My face doesn't do things, Vaggie said. Your face does so many things. It's very expressive. It is not, Vaggie. Charlie put her hand over Vaggie's. Soft, immediate. I love you. I have loved you since you found me in the worst period of my afterlife and decided to stay. She held Vaggie's gaze. And I'm falling for Izuku. And I don't, she stopped. Breathed. I don't want to choose. I don't think I should have to choose. I don't think any of us should. She looked between them. But I need to know how you both feel about that. The kitchen was very quiet. Vaggie looked at her hand over hers. Looked at Izuku. He could feel her working through it, the same way she worked through tactical problems, methodically, without flinching from the difficult parts. Izuku said, I care about both of you. I'm not going to pretend I don't. And I'll respect whatever you decide, both of you together, because this is your relationship and I'm the newcomer. Charlie beamed. Vaggie looked at the ceiling. This is insane, she said. Hell is insane, Charlie said reasonably. I know hell is insane. That's not, she looked at Izuku. Then at Charlie. Then back at Izuku. Her expression cycled through several things and settled on something that was not quite resigned and was actually closer to decided. Fine. Charlie made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a cheer. Don't make it weird, Vaggie said. I'm going to make it a little weird, Charlie said. Just briefly. Just for a moment. She leaned across the table and kissed Vaggie, quick and warm, and then turned and kissed Izuku the same way, and sat back with her hands folded looking extremely pleased with herself. There, she said. Briefly weird. Now we're all on the same page. Vaggie was staring at the table. Her face was doing the thing Charlie had identified. I need more coffee, she said. I'll get it, Izuku said, standing, and caught the edge of Vaggie's gaze as he passed her, the smallest possible softening around her eyes, and filed it somewhere important. That night the three of them were together in a way that had nothing choreographed about it and everything real, Charlie's warmth filling the room like sunlight through red glass, Vaggie's intensity making everything exact, Izuku finding himself between them in every sense of that and understanding, clearly, that this was something he hadn't known he was looking for. So, Charlie said at some point in the comfortable dark, her voice soft and slightly wicked, demon-human hybrids are theoretically possible, you know. Completely unprecedented biologically but, Vaggie threw a pillow at her. I'm just saying. Charlie said, catching it, laughing quietly. Izuku's brain had stopped producing coherent output. Sleep, Vaggie said firmly. And then, quieter, both of you. They slept. 3 days later, Alastor's trap sprung. It came as a distress signal, not digitally, not through any network, but through the shadow system itself, a death signature spike from the Eastern Docks district that read as multiple sinners, civilian, under immediate threat. He felt it in the bond and went, because the bond didn't lie, and took 30 shadow soldiers. He walked into an empty dock with ambient death energy that had been arranged rather than organic. Alastor had not set the trap himself. He understood that later, the radio demon had given the information about Izuku's shadow sense response parameters to whoever had designed this, and whoever had designed this knew exactly how to trigger it. The creatures came from the water, rising through the dock planks like they were made of it, gray, amorphous, large, and deeply wrong in a way that made his shadow system recoil rather than recognize. Shadow resistant. Shadow feeding. They moved toward his soldiers and his soldiers hit them and the strikes landed but with half the expected effect, the creatures absorbing shadow energy rather than being damaged by it. 2 soldiers dissolved in 15 seconds, absorbed. He switched immediately. Physical combat, shadow armor on himself rather than projected outward, shadow tendrils as weapons of restraint rather than direct force. He couldn't use his army effectively here so he fought in front of them, letting the soldiers take flanking positions while he kept the creature's attention. It was hard. The hardest fight since he'd arrived. They hit with physical force that the shadow armor took but not cleanly, and one got inside his guard and drove him into a dock wall hard enough to see color, and he came back with a shadow tendril grab that wrapped around it and didn't release, holding it still while he drove a shadow-empowered strike with everything he had into its core. The creature dissolved. Not into shadow energy he could use, into nothing. They weren't from Hell's natural environment. They were from somewhere deeper, somewhere the normal rules didn't apply. He took hits he shouldn't have. His shadow armor cracked twice. He ran through the full range of his individual combat options, testing what worked. Physical strikes enhanced with shadow did more than shadow alone, suggesting these things fed on shadow energy specifically and couldn't digest the physical force that came with it. So he punched through the energy rather than leading with it. The last one went down when he expanded the domain, not as a sustained zone but as a burst, flooding the immediate area with shadow energy and then instantly contracting it, creating a compression wave. The creature was caught in the contraction and crushed between waves of dark energy. He stood in the empty dock breathing hard, his soldiers at 3/4 strength, his armor needing time to rebuild. He felt it before he saw it, the upgrade pulse from the system, a response to surviving a genuine, significant threat. The domain had grown. Range increased, activation faster, and there was something new at the edge of his range, a secondary function, the ability to designate a permanent shadow anchor point, a fixed position his domain could expand from even when he was distant. Domain of the Monarch, Stage 2. He stood still in the dock and let the system settle and felt Alastor's presence at the edge of the area, watching from a distance that said he'd been there the whole time and hadn't intervened. He sent one shadow soldier toward Alastor's position. The soldier stopped 10 meters from the radio demon and faced him. A message, not a threat. Alastor appeared properly then, walking into the dock with his cane and his smile, and the smile was doing something Izuku hadn't seen it do before. It was carrying genuine calculation that hadn't been resolved yet, the expression of someone who'd expected one outcome and gotten another and was revising. "You survived," Alastor said. "I did. Those creatures were significantly more dangerous than your previous encounters." "They were." Izuku met his eyes. "Someone told them how my shadow system works." A pause. "Yes. Someone you report to." Alastor's smile didn't waver but his eyes went very still. "You're perceptive." "I've been patient about it," Izuku said. "You've been watching me, feeding information somewhere, testing what I can and can't handle. I've let it happen because I needed time to understand your position and because I wasn't going to accuse you without evidence." He kept his voice level. "Now I have enough." He held Alastor's gaze. "Who are you reporting to, and what do they want?" The dock was very quiet. Alastor looked at him, really looked, the performance down by a fraction, genuine attention on full. The cane tapped once. "Something old," he said. "Something that predates Hell's current structure. Something that has been patient in the way that only something vast can be patient." He paused. "Something that wants what you carry, Izuku. The Shadow Monarch's power. The ability to command death itself." For an entity like that, he smiled, and this smile was the real one, which was tired and complicated and far less pleasant than the theatrical version. "The appeal is obvious. And your deal with them? Bound long ago. Before I understood what I was agreeing to." The cane tapped again. "I've been managing the relationship. Providing enough to remain useful. Not enough to," he stopped. "The creatures tonight were their idea. Testing your limits directly. And you let it happen." "I facilitated it," Alastor said, and the word cost him, precise and honest. "I'm not proud of that." Izuku looked at him for a long moment. "Then, break it." Alastor blinked. "Real, again. The deal. Help us, the hotel, the extermination defense, everything, and I'll use what I have to try to break the binding." He kept his eyes steady. Shadow energy is the power of death applied. Bindings like what you're describing are anchored in something dark. I might be able to cut them. Alastor was completely still. No contract, Izuku said. No deal. Help because it's the right thing to do and you're capable of it, even if that capability's been buried under years of, he chose the word carefully. Obligation. 3 full seconds of silence. Alastor extended his hand. Not clawed fingers spread in a gesture of an overlord deal, just a hand, open, the way people shook hands before everything got complicated. You, Alastor said, are genuinely the strangest thing to ever land in hell. Izuku shook his hand. I've been told. Alastor was quiet for a moment, holding the handshake. Then, softer than anything Izuku had heard from him, don't let Charlie down. He stopped. Started differently. She believes too much. I'd hate to watch that broken. I know, Izuku said. It won't be. They let go. Walking back to the hotel, his shadow soldiers falling in around him, he sent his awareness upward, extending his shadow sense, letting it reach toward the city's upper atmosphere, checking the patterns he'd started cataloging since the scout appearance. He found it. Not one exorcist this time. A cluster, high altitude, moving in the coordinated pattern of a strike team running reconnaissance. Not the full extermination force, but significantly more than a single scout. He ran the numbers fast. Timeline revised. This wasn't 4 months away. He got back to the hotel and found Charlie and Vaggie in the lobby, both of them reading his face the moment he walked in. What? Charlie said. He said it straight. No softening. The extermination is coming early. And they're coming for us. The lobby went very still. Charlie's eyes went from concern to something harder. Vaggie's hand moved to her spear. Husk set down his glass quietly. Angel Dust stopped mid-sentence in whatever he'd been saying to Nifty. How early? Vaggie asked. 3 weeks, he said. Maybe less. Charlie straightened. Not the performance brightness, not the optimism armor, just her, genuine and clear-eyed and already thinking forward. Okay, she said. Then we have 3 weeks. She looked at Vaggie. Vaggie nodded. They both looked at Izuku. Tell us what you need, Charlie said. He looked at his shadow soldiers, 32 of them, standing ready throughout the hotel, and felt the system humming in his chest, the death energy of hell feeding into it constantly, the new domain capacity pressing at its edges, the commander class from Rathia standing at his right shoulder like a dark general. 3 weeks. He'd built empires from less. First thing tomorrow, he said, we call in everything we have. Chapter 3, Kingdom Come. The hotel changed in 3 weeks. Not cosmetically, the pink and gold Victorian bones stayed, Charlie wouldn't have it any other way, but the energy of the place shifted into something purposeful and dense. Shadow soldiers moved through every corridor on rotating patrol. Carmilla's weapons shipments arrived in crates that Nifty catalogued with terrifying precision and organizational enthusiasm. Cannibal Town warriors set up a forward camp in the hotel's east courtyard, politely terrifying and surprisingly good at card games. Izuku didn't sleep much. He didn't need to, not the way he used to. The Shadow Monarch system ran continuous passive accumulation through Hell's death energy environment, and that process kept his body running at a baseline that would have concerned a doctor in his world. He used the hours between midnight and dawn to extend his shadow anchor points through the city, planting fixed domain nodes at strategic positions, rooftops, intersections, the defensive perimeter Carmilla had helped him map. By day 14, his shadow army stood at 240 soldiers. By day 17, 280. The quality had jumped too, not just quantity. The Rathia's commander class acted as a relay node for his commands, making the whole network faster and more precise. He could deploy the full army in a distributed tactical pattern across half the city and maintain clear control of every unit simultaneously. He was standing on the hotel roof running the morning patrol check when Carmilla arrived. She came through the front gates with 4 of her personal guard and a crate that 2 of them carried between them, and she moved with the same precise economy she always did, not a step wasted. She found him on the roof because she looked up first, which told him her threat assessment habits were the same as his. He came down to meet her. "Last shipment," she said, by way of greeting. She opened the crate herself. Angelic blades, 40 of them, and beneath those a layer of ranged weapons, not firearms in any conventional sense, but ranged angelic implements that fired compressed holy light. "The rest of my cash is already distributed through your perimeter points. How's your people's readiness?" "They've been ready for 400 years, she said. "They just haven't had leadership worth following into a fight with heaven." She looked at him directly. "Until now." He took that without deflecting it, because deflecting it would have been dishonest. "Your daughters are in the secure interior. East wing, 4th floor, 2 of your shadow soldiers and 2 of mine on the door." Something moved through her composure, brief. "Yes. They won't be touched," he said. "I promise you that specifically." She looked at him for a moment, the same measuring look she'd given him in her sitting room, but different now, because the measurement was complete and she was working with the result rather than still gathering data. She reached forward and adjusted the collar of his jacket, which had been slightly crooked. It was such a precise, personal gesture, so at odds with her usual controlled distance, that he went still. "I've been in hell 400 years, she said, straightening the collar with deliberate focus. "I've made exactly 3 decisions in that time that I've never regretted." She looked up at him. "My daughters. My territory." She held his gaze. "And this." She kissed him. It was nothing like Charlie's warmth or Vaggie's intensity, it was measured and deliberate and absolute, the kiss of someone who had taken a very long time to decide something and was not uncertain about the decision now that it was made. His hands went to her waist by instinct and she allowed that, and when she pulled back her composure was exactly as intact as it had been before, which was either extraordinary discipline or proof that she'd been planning this long enough to be very calm about it. "That's not a deal," she said, looking at him steadily. "That's a promise returned." "I remember," he said. Something warmed in her eyes, controlled, but there. "Good." She stepped back. "Now. Walk me through the northern perimeter. I have concerns about the gap between anchor points 7 and 9. He walked her through the perimeter. They argued about the gap between anchor points 7 and 9 for 20 minutes and came to an agreement that was better than either of their individual positions, because she understood defensive architecture and he understood shadow domain mechanics and the overlap produced something neither had thought of independently. When they finished, she was almost smiling. He'd take it. Rosie arrived that afternoon with 60 Cannibal Town warriors and a cake. The cake was enormous, impeccably decorated, and he chose not to ask about all the ingredients. She presented it to Charlie in the lobby with the ceremony of a head of state delivering a gift, and Charlie received it with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved cake and was not going to let questions about ingredients dim that. Rosie found Izuku afterward in the back courtyard, running his commander-class shadow soldiers through tactical formations. She watched for a few minutes with the appreciative attention she brought to everything she found interesting, then came to stand beside him. "The northern camp is established," she said. "My people understand the defensive grid. We hold the east flank and the secondary route into Cannibal Town, which also protects our supply line." "Good. If the exorcists split their force, we collapse inward and your shadow anchor at point 12 activates to fill the gap." She'd memorized the plan. "Yes. I went over it with your rather terrifying shadow general." She glanced at the commander class. "Does he have a name?" "Shadow commanders don't usually, I've been calling him Gerald," she said. "He doesn't seem to mind." Izuku looked at the commander class. The shadow soldier stood impassively. "Gerald," Izuku said. The soldier's head moved very slightly in what was either acknowledgement or coincidence. Gerald it is, Rosie said, satisfied. She turned to Izuku with the warm, direct attention that was her baseline. And how are you? It was such a simple question that it caught him sideways, the way simple things do when you've been running at operational capacity for 2 weeks. Managing, he said. That's not what I asked. He looked at his soldiers. I'm scared, he said, because she'd asked directly and she deserved direct. Not about the fight. About whether I've done enough. Whether the timeline is what I think it is. Whether my extraction will work on exorcists or whether it'll fail at the worst possible moment and cost people their lives. He paused. I've led people into dangerous situations before. I've never been responsible for an entire city. Rosie looked at him quietly for a moment. Then she took his hand in both of hers, small, warm, firm, and held it the way you hold something you're not going to let go of. Dear boy, she said. Every person in this city has been waiting for someone to be afraid on their behalf for centuries. The extermination comes and they endure it and rebuild and wait for the next one, and no one has ever been afraid of it in a way that meant they were going to do something about it. She squeezed his hand. Your fear means you understand the stakes. That's not a weakness. That's why you're the right person. He looked at her. She smiled, and it was the real one, and it reached her eyes and stayed there. Also, she said, releasing his hand but keeping close, you have 280 shadow soldiers, 3 overlord allies, Charlie Morningstar, Vaggie, and Gerald. She glanced at the commander class. Gerald looks very capable. He laughed, actual and genuine, which he hadn't done in 2 weeks, and she looked pleased about it. There it is, she said. Much better. She pulled him into a hug that was brief and entirely unexpected and completely genuine, her head barely reaching his shoulder, arms around him with the unhesitating warmth of someone who'd decided on this and wasn't second-guessing it. He hugged back because there was nothing else honest to do. I've decided you're mine, she said into his shoulder. I trust Charlie and Vaggie won't mind sharing. From behind him, the more the merrier. Charlie's voice, from the courtyard doorway, bright and entirely unsurprised. From slightly further back, I mind a little. Vaggie. Fine. I don't mind. Rosie pulled back and looked at him with deep satisfaction. Perfect, she said. Everything is working out exactly as I planned. You didn't plan this, Izuku said. I plan everything, dear. I've just gotten very good at making it look organic. She patted his arm. Now. Show me the southern anchor point. I think there's a flaw in the coverage geometry and I want to make sure before tomorrow. He showed her the southern anchor point. She was right about the flaw. They fixed it. Vox made his move on day 18. It didn't come with warning or announcement. It came in the middle of the morning when the hotel was at full operational tempo and therefore hardest to interrupt, which meant Vox had been watching the schedule, which he'd expected. What he hadn't expected was the scale. Valentino's remaining forces came from the south, 40 soldiers, heavier class than the first wave, clearly equipped and briefed. Velvet's influence network had apparently recruited 3 independent overlord-level demons who came from the east and north, each with their own crews ranging from 20 to 50 fighters. And Vox himself came with a personal force of signal-enhanced soldiers, demons who'd been augmented with electromagnetic hardware that let Vox broadcast his control directly through them. Total incoming, somewhere north of 200 fighters. Husk saw it on the monitoring feeds. He'd become the hotel's tactical observer, sitting behind the bar with 12 screens running in a drink he never finished, and said flatly, 200 plus. 3 approach vectors. Vox leading the eastern column personally. Izuku was already moving. Carmilla, he said, and she was beside him in 4 steps. Northern and western approach is yours. Your people plus 40 of my infantry soldiers. Hold the perimeter, don't chase, make them come to you. She nodded once. Gone. Rosie. She was already at the door to the east courtyard. Your warriors reinforce the east courtyard wall. Your job is to make sure nothing gets into the hotel interior. She smiled and didn't bother responding verbally. She was already talking to her warriors in a quick, cheerful tone that sounded like she was organizing a garden party and conveyed the tactical briefing with terrifying efficiency. Angel, Izuku said. Angel dust dropped from the staircase landing with 4 arms extended and 6 eyes sharp. Finally, he said. I've been doing stretches. Southwest corridor. Anyone who gets through the perimeter meets you first. Oh, they're gonna meet me first and last. He cracked his knuckles across all 4 hands. Husk. Already pulling the feeds to track their movement patterns. Don't ask me to fight anything. I'm not. Izuku met his eyes. I need you seeing everything and calling it in real time. Husk gave him the 2mm glass rays. Done. Nifty. She appeared from approximately nowhere. Yes. Interior traps. Everything you set up last week, activate it. She made a sound of pure joy and disappeared. Charlie and Vaggie were in the lobby doorway, side by side, and they looked at him with the same expression, not waiting for instructions, waiting for confirmation that they were going where he was going. With me, he said. They went out the front together. The southern column hit the front perimeter first. Valentino's crew, bigger and better equipped than the first wave, and angrier, because losing 40 soldiers to a human was the kind of humiliation that built up into something focused. They came through the outer perimeter markers fast, confident in their numbers. Izuku activated the shadow anchor at the front gate. The domain expanded from the fixed point, not from him but from the anchor, which meant the domain covered the full front approach without requiring him to be stationary. His soldiers within it moved with the boosted speed and force of the domain effect. The Valentino crew hit a line of 60 shadow infantry running at enhanced capacity and found the math was wrong. Izuku went straight for their commander. He was big, combat-adapted, fast, the kind of demon who'd been fighting since the moment he arrived in Hell and had gotten very good at it. He swung first with a hook that would have taken most people's heads off. Izuku ducked under it, shadow armor activating over his forearms, and came up with a body shot that sent shadow energy cracking outward from the impact. The commander grabbed him. All 4 hands, 1 on each arm, trying to lock him down. He shadow-stepped. Vanished from the grip and reappeared behind, both hands locked together, full force concentrated through shadow energy, between the commander's shoulder blades. The crack was audible across the courtyard. The commander went down face first and stayed down. He extracted without pausing, the shadow rose immediately, commander class, joining his network. His army ticked up. He turned and Vaggie was 10 meters away, already halfway through Valentino's second line, her spear moving in short, devastating arcs, no wasted motion, the fighting style of someone who'd been trained by people with very specific standards and had never lost the baseline it built. She wasn't holding back. He'd seen her pull her power at training, this wasn't that. This was what Vaggie looked like at full capacity, and it was extraordinary. A demon flanked her from the left. She caught it in her peripheral, pivoted, and the spear came around in a tight arc that knocked it clean off its feet. Charlie was on the right flank with Hellfire in both hands, and the Charlie who'd kissed him on the hotel steps and thrown pillows at Vaggie and made breakfast on quiet mornings was not the Charlie he was looking at right now. This version had her horns burning at the tips, Hellfire running up her forearms, and the specific expression of someone who loved deeply and was protecting what they loved with everything they had. She swept through a cluster of 6 soldiers with one extended burst of Hellfire that didn't hurt them, exactly, it was controlled, pushing rather than burning, throwing them back and into each other with enough force that none of them were getting up quickly. She was thinking about the extraction, he realized. She was fighting in a way that left them alive for him. He felt something for her in that moment that was bigger than what he had words for. He moved to her position, they met in the center of the front courtyard, and back to back they held the line while his shadow soldiers worked through the flanks. She fought forward, he fought back, and they moved together with the coordination of people who'd been living in each other's orbit for 3 weeks and had internalized each other's rhythms without planning to. The southern column broke in 6 minutes. He extracted as he went, 12 new soldiers from the aftermath, the strongest candidates from Valentino's best fighters. His army jumped to 300. The radio crackled, Husk's voice through the communication system they'd rigged, his tone unchanged from his usual flat delivery, which somehow made the information more reliable. Northern column is stalled at the perimeter. Carmilla's people are holding. Eastern column has hit the courtyard wall. Rosie's handling it. And Vox? Izuku said. A pause. He's not with the eastern column. He split off. Another pause. He's coming through the south side alley. Personal route. He's trying to come in behind us, Vaggie said. While we're focused on the main columns, Izuku said. He surveilled our response patterns. He knew we'd push forward. Smart, Charlie said, not admiringly, just accurately. Go, Vaggie said to him. We have this front. He went. The south alley was narrow, running between the hotel's west wall and the neighboring building. Vox was already in it, moving fast with his signal-enhanced soldiers, 8 of them, each broadcasting on Vox's frequency, responding to his electromagnetic commands rather than individual volition. They moved with a precision that his shadow soldiers could match but that most conventional fighters couldn't, because the coordination was faster than biological response time. Izuku reached the alley entrance and stopped. Vox stopped too. For a moment they just looked at each other in the narrow space, the city's red light cutting between the buildings, Vox's screen face running through frequencies that Izuku had started to read the way you read facial expressions after enough exposure. You were right about the narrative, Vox said. I know. The extermination coming early, Heaven focusing on the hotel, Vox's voice modulator was doing the lower frequency thing that meant elevated processing. You were right about all of it and I published the magazine piece anyway because I was scared and scared makes me reactive. Izuku waited. I'm still scared, Vox said. I know that too. Vox looked at him. The screen cycled through several colors, not the signal manipulation display he used in broadcasts, but something more irregular. Real processing. My soldiers are better in formations you haven't seen before. I've been designing this approach for 2 weeks based on your response patterns, I know, Izuku said again. Vox stopped. You've had cameras on the hotel for 2 weeks, Izuku said. I've let them run after the first day because I wanted you to have the data. I wanted you to build your best possible response and bring it here. He held Vox's screen face. Because the version of this where you stay out of it and the extermination kills 30% of Hell's population and your infrastructure along with it is worse than the version where we have this fight and you see what you're actually dealing with. The alley was very quiet. Vox's signal-enhanced soldiers stood waiting for a command. I can't beat you, Vox said. It wasn't defeat. It was the specific tone of someone stating a calculation they'd arrived at reluctantly. Not here. Not like this. Izuku looked at the soldiers behind Vox. Call them off. Vox was still for 3 seconds. 5. 8. His screen flickered with something that might have been the electronic equivalent of a long exhale. He signaled. His soldiers stood down, a visible shift from combat mode, weapons lowering, the electromagnetic charge in the air dropping off. Izuku let out a breath he'd been controlling. He hadn't been certain. The magazine piece. Already pulled, Vox said. This morning. A pause. I wasn't, he stopped. Started differently. I'm not good at being on a side that isn't winning. We're not winning yet, Izuku said. But we're going to. He met the screen face. I need your broadcast network. Vox's screens brightened. For what? When this is over, if this works the way I think it can, Heaven is going to have to negotiate. For the first time in Hell's history, they're going to sit across from demons and discuss terms. I need Hell to see that happen in real time. I need it broadcast everywhere, every ring, every district, every overlord's screen and every sinner's phone equivalent. He held Vox's gaze. I need your reach. Vox stared at him. His screen flickered through several expressions: calculation, ambition, something that might have been genuine interest in an outcome for reasons beyond self-preservation. If you pull it off, Vox said. If you actually stop the extermination, then you're the network that broadcast history, Izuku said. That's not nothing. Another long pause. Then Vox straightened, and his screen settled on the broadcasting frequency he used when he'd made a decision. The northern column is pinned. I can redirect Valentino's remaining people out of the engagement. I have enough signal in this area to override his direct control and reroute. Do it. Vox raised one hand, his signal extending outward through the alley, up over the building, and a moment later Husk's voice came through the communication rig. Northern column is pulling back. A pause. They're retreating. Velvet's independent contractors are pulling out too, Vox said, monitoring his signal. She'll want something in return for this. Tell her she gets an exclusive interview with Charlie after. He started back toward the front of the hotel. After. She's going to be unbearable about it, Vox said, falling into step with him, which was not something he'd expected and apparently wasn't something Vox had expected either, because he looked slightly surprised at himself. She sounds like she usually is, Izuku said. Vox made a sound that might have been a laugh. They came around the front of the hotel together. The main courtyard was quiet. Carmilla's people were moving through the northern perimeter, checking for stragglers. Rosie's warriors were doing something cheerful and organized in the east courtyard that involved what sounded like celebratory conversation and a lot of enthusiasm. The shadow soldiers stood at parade rest throughout the grounds, their patrol patterns already resumed. Vaggie saw Vox and her hand went to her spear. He's fine, Izuku said. She looked at Vox. Looked at Izuku. The hand stayed near the spear but didn't grip it. Fine, she said, in a tone that meant she was going to want a full explanation later and he was going to give one. Charlie came around the corner and stopped when she saw Vox. Then she smiled, the full one, the real one. Mr. Vox, she said. Welcome to the Hazbin Hotel. Can I get you something? We have cake. Vox's screen cycled through several frequencies. Sure, he said, in a voice that had lost most of its broadcast texture and sounded, briefly, like a person. Yeah. They didn't have long to breathe. Izuku spent the evening after the battle running extraction on everything that had been left behind, Valentino's people, the independent contractor soldiers, all of them incapacitated rather than destroyed. The Shadow Army hit 380. The system's passive accumulation in the aftermath of the battle added another 40 by midnight. 420 Shadow soldiers. He anchored new points throughout the hotel grounds and the surrounding 6 blocks. His domain could now cover a significantly larger area at full activation, and with the Stage 2 upgrade, the fixed anchors meant the domain spread from multiple points simultaneously rather than radiating from him alone. The hotel could be inside the domain even if he was fighting somewhere outside it. He was doing the final perimeter check at 2 in the morning when he felt the extermination fleet. He'd been checking the upper atmosphere every few hours since the scout cluster. This was different from any previous reading, not reconnaissance positioning but approach formation, disciplined and massive, the kind of formation you built when you were coming to finish something. He pulled his shadow sense as high as it would reach and counted. He'd expected 200 exorcists based on Carmilla's intelligence about previous cycles. He counted 350 before his range ran out, and he didn't think he'd reached the end of the fleet. He went inside. Charlie and Vaggie were in their room, which had evolved from his room over the past week without any formal announcement, and he knocked rather than walking in because old habits. Charlie said come in and he came in. They both read his face immediately. How many? Vaggie said. At least 350 visible. Probably more. He sat on the edge of the bed. They're here. Not tomorrow. Now, they'll be in range by dawn. Charlie sat up. She looked at him, and there was fear in her face, real fear, which she didn't hide. Okay, she said. It's more than I planned for, he said. I know. My army is the strongest it's been. The alliances are in place. The domain coverage is better than I expected. But 350 exorcists with angelic weapons, you haven't failed yet, Vaggie said. Not a compliment, an observation, delivered flat and precise. Every time the situation has been harder than you planned for, you've adapted. I've watched you do it every day for 3 weeks. She held his gaze. What do you need? He looked at them both. Charlie, warm and frightened and completely present. Vaggie, clear-eyed and ready and quietly, absolutely with him. He said, I need you both with me. In the field. I need Charlie's hellfire inside the domain perimeter. Her power amplified by domain energy is a force multiplier we haven't fully tested, but I think it's significant. And I need Vaggie, he paused. What? Vaggie said. I need your spear. She looked at her angelic weapon. Back at him. Why specifically my spear? Because it's angelic in origin and I want to try something, he said. A theory I've been running since Carmilla's intel on exorcist weapons. He met her eyes. I think if I channel shadow energy through an angelic weapon it creates something that works against both demonic and angelic enemies simultaneously. I tested it in the Rathius fight with shadow energy through my own strikes. The principle should extend. Vaggie looked at her spear for a long moment. Then she held it out to him. He took it, let shadow energy run through it, carefully, and the blade changed at the point of contact, the angelic steel absorbing the dark energy and holding it rather than repelling it, the contradiction of materials creating a visual effect that was both beautiful and unsettling, the blade running with black fire. He handed it back. She held it. Looked at the black fire. Looked at him. That's either brilliant or catastrophic. I'll let you know which one after, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. They didn't sleep. They sat together until dawn, the three of them on the hotel roof, Charlie between them, her head on Izuku's shoulder and Vaggie's hand in hers, watching the red sky for the first sign of movement. Angel Dust came up around 4, dropped down beside them without asking, and sat in companionable silence. Husk appeared at 5 with 4 cups of something hot and didn't comment on the formation. Nifty arrived at 5:30 and went immediately to the wall to do something with string that was probably trap-related. Alastor materialized at 6, leaning on his cane at the far edge of the roof, and looked at the sky. The hotel was awake and quiet and waiting. The extermination fleet appeared at dawn. Not gradually, they came through the cloud layer all at once, a formation of exorcists in full angelic armor, white and gold and carrying blades that caught the red light and threw it back wrong, too clean, too bright for this sky. They were organized in strike wings, each wing of 20 moving in tight formation, and they spread across the horizon like a wall coming down. Adam was at the front. Even at distance, he was unmistakable, bigger than the exorcists around him, carrying the first angelic blade, moving with the particular arrogance of someone who'd been doing this for centuries and had never faced anything that changed the outcome. He led the front wing and he was already angling toward the hotel. They know exactly where they're going, Carmilla said from his left. She'd appeared at some point during the approach, fully armed, her personal guard deployed in the formation they drilled. They knew before they left, Izuku said. Sarah, Vaggie said quietly. She authorized this targeting. Izuku watched the fleet's approach vector. They're not here for general extermination this cycle. They're here for us. So all of hell gets a pass. Angel Dust said. That's actually kind of funny. Nobody laughed but several people's expressions indicated they acknowledged the point. Izuku activated all 16 shadow anchor points simultaneously. The domain expanded outward from every anchor at once, overlapping fields merging into a continuous zone that covered the hotel and the surrounding 6 blocks in shadow energy. The air within the domain went darker, the ambient red of hell's sky dimming slightly, his soldiers throughout the zone straightening as the domain effect hit them, faster and stronger. He felt every one of his 420 soldiers through the bond, a web of dark energy spreading through 6 city blocks, ready. He looked at Carmilla. When they're within range of your angelic weapons, your people open fire. Don't wait for them to land. She relayed the order without turning her head. He looked at Rosie at the east position. She gave him a small wave. He looked at Angel Dust. Southwest corridor. On it. Gone. He looked at Husk. Calling it? From the bar, Husk confirmed. Already set up. He looked at Charlie. She had hellfire in both hands, her demon horns fully lit, her eyes carrying that thing he'd seen in the courtyard battle, the love that was also fury, the protection that looked like force. She met his eyes and nodded. He looked at Vaggie. The shadow fire on her spear blade was steady, burning black and cold in the morning air. She was already watching the incoming fleet with the professional calm of someone who'd once been part of that fleet and understood exactly how it operated. Izuku, she said, without looking at him. Yeah. When this is over, she stopped. Shook her head slightly. Never mind. Just, don't die. Working on it, he said. They hit the perimeter. Carmilla's forces opened with the ranged angelic weapons, compressed holy light arcing upward into the fleet's lower formations. 2 exorcists dropped in the first volley. The fleet adapted, they'd trained against demonic resistance, not angelic counterfire, and it cost them a half-second of reorganization that Izuku's shadow soldiers used. He sent the front line up. Shadow soldiers launched from rooftops and upper-story windows, not flying, but launching, using the domain's energy boost to cover distance faster than anything biological in hell could manage. They hit the lower formation of exorcists mid-air, and the shadow soldiers that made contact with angelic blades dissolved, but they absorbed strikes that would have reached the ground, and the soldiers behind them kept coming. The domain was working on the exorcists. Not heavily, they were beings of significant divine power and the shadow energy didn't cripple them, but it slowed them, dimmed the absolute brilliance of their light, made them slightly heavier in the air. Within the domain, his soldiers were enhanced. Outside his soldiers, the exorcists were reduced. The gap was incremental but across a large-scale engagement, incremental compounded fast. Adam landed in the hotel's front street like a meteor. The impact blew cobblestones outward in a 20-foot radius and he stood in the crater with the first angelic blade already in hand and looked at the shadow soldiers surrounding him with an expression of profound amusement. Hell's got itself a little army, he said. That's cute. Izuku stepped through the shadow soldiers and faced him. Adam looked him up and down. You're the human. The thing that's been freaking Sarah out. He tilted his head. Ha. You're like 5'8". 5'9", Izuku said. Doesn't matter. This is going to take about 30 seconds. The first blade came in fast, faster than anything Izuku had faced, the speed of divine mandate behind it, the kind of cut that ended things permanently. He moved right, shadow armor covering his forearm to block the flat of the blade rather than the edge, and felt the impact ring through his arm like a struck bell. That was angelic steel. That was the actual threshold of what his shadow armor could handle. Good. Now he knew the ceiling. He went in close, too close for the full blade swing, inside the reach where Adam's raw power advantage required big movements to express, and hit Adam twice in rapid succession, shadow energy cracking against angelic armor. The armor held. Adam grabbed him by the shoulder and threw him into the hotel's exterior wall. He hit it hard. The wall held but he felt it. He was back out of the crater before Adam reached him, shadow step eating the distance, and hit from the side this time, not trying to break the armor but redirecting the momentum, using Adam's own forward movement to spin him and take a half-second of imbalance. Adam recovered fast. Faster than anyone he'd fought. Millennia of combat, the combat instincts of the first man, the power of heaven's strongest warrior. Izuku shadow stepped continuously, never in the same place for more than a second, circling, striking and pulling back, making Adam track constantly, burning his reaction time. The first blade was devastating, but it required Adam to connect with it. Adam couldn't connect with what he couldn't pin down. Adam got frustrated. That was the in. He swung wider, covering more area with each arc, trying to force a response. Izuku took the bait, let himself be pushed back, let Adam think he was managing the exchange, and when Adam committed to the wide overhead swing that would have cut through the building behind him, he went under it, came up inside Adam's guard, and activated the domain. Not the zone-wide domain. A localized burst, concentrated in the 3 feet between them, shadow energy condensed to the point of being almost solid. Adam jerked back from it, the divine light in his armor flickering under the sudden concentrated shadow pressure, and in the half-second of instinctive recoil, Izuku hit him. Both hands, everything behind it, shadow energy and the raw physical force he'd built over a lifetime of training, the fundamental body-breaking power of a hero who'd learned to use his ability so completely it was no longer ability and had become simply himself. The hit connected with Adam's chest and the sound it made was wrong, too much force concentrated too fast, and Adam went back 15 feet and hit the street on his back and the first angelic blade bounced out of his grip and skittered across the cobblestones. Silence in that immediate area. Adam lay on his back staring at the sky. Shadow soldiers closed in around him instantly, 15 of them, forming a containment ring. Adam could break it, he was still conscious, still dangerous, but breaking it would cost him time and effort that the current situation didn't allow. Overhead, the battle was still going. His shadow army was fighting the Exorcist fleet across 6 blocks of air and rooftops. Carmilla's weapons were still firing. Rosie's warriors were holding the east. The sounds of it all ran through the air like a constant pressure. He could hear Charlie's voice somewhere to his north, the crackling of hellfire, the specific sound of someone fighting with everything they had. He could feel Vaggie through the shadow bond, not directly, she wasn't a shadow soldier, but the shadow fire on her spear was interacting with his domain and he could feel its position. She was moving fast, taking down exorcists in the northwest sector with a brutal efficiency that was doing real work. He picked up the first angelic blade. Adam's eyes focused on that. Something changed in his expression, not fear, exactly, but reassessment. Izuku held the blade and let shadow energy run through it. The same thing he'd done with Vaggie's spear, but this was the first angelic blade, Adam's weapon, the most powerful angelic instrument in existence, and when shadow energy entered it the contradiction was so fundamental that the blade glowed black and white simultaneously, 2 opposing forces occupying the same physical space. He felt the system straining at it. The Shadow Monarch's power and angelic divine energy running through the same channel, pushing against each other, almost, it stabilized. He'd made a weapon that shouldn't exist. Adam was staring at it. "What did you do to the extermination ends today," Izuku said. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just certain, the way he'd learned to be certain about things that needed to be done. "You're going to go back to heaven and tell Sarah that hell has a defense that makes extermination strategically untenable. And you're going to tell her that Charlie Morningstar has a proposal for an actual long-term solution to overcrowding that doesn't require mass killing." He held Adam's gaze. "And you're going to do that because the alternative is staying down here in my domain until the rest of your fleet retreats, which they're going to do because I've spent 3 weeks making sure this city is impossible to pacify." Adam stared at him. "You beat me," Adam said. "Yes. Nobody beats me." "I did." Adam's jaw worked. He lay in the street surrounded by shadow soldiers with the first angelic blade pointed at the sky in someone else's hands, and his expression cycled through several things, rage, wounded pride, something that might have been genuine shock, and settled on something more complicated. He looked up at the shadow soldiers. At the domain covering the city. At the black and white blade. The extermination force isn't going to stop because I say so, he said. They're deployed. They have orders from Sarah. Then I'll make it stop, Izuku said. He raised the blade upward and pushed the domain expansion to its absolute limit, not 6 blocks, full extension, everything he had, every anchor point firing simultaneously at maximum capacity. The shadow covered Pentagram City like a wave, 20 blocks in every direction, the air going dark and heavy with death energy. And then he pulled. Not shadow soldiers this time. He let the domain's energy speak directly to every exorcist within range, not attacking, not extracting, but announcing. Every exorcist in the field felt the full weight of the Shadow Monarch's domain, felt what it meant to be surrounded by something that could reach into the fundamental nature of their existence and pull, and in that moment the instinct that every soldier has, the one that measures the gap between mission and survival, made its calculation. The exorcist fleet pulled back. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But wing by wing, the formations peeled away from their attack vectors, retreating upward, gathering in the upper atmosphere in a holding pattern that was the military equivalent of "we need to talk to command about this." The battle sounds dimmed. Then stopped. Husk's voice through the communication rig, "They're pulling back. All sectors. The fleet is in holding formation above the cloud layer." A pause. Izuku. They stopped. Charlie's voice, somewhere behind him, "Oh my God." He let the domain settle back to its normal radius. The black and white blade went dark, the angelic energy dissipating now that Adam had submitted to the situation. He handed it back. Adam took it. Sat up slowly. Looked at Izuku with an expression he couldn't fully read, which was probably the first time that had ever happened on Adam's face. "Sarah's going to want an explanation," Adam said. "Tell her to send a diplomat," Izuku said. "Not soldiers. A diplomat." Adam looked at him for another moment. Then he stood, which his shadow soldiers allowed, and rose into the air slowly. He hovered, looking down at Izuku. "You know this doesn't end it," Adam said. "Heaven doesn't just, I know," Izuku said. "But it starts something different. That's enough for today." Adam looked at him for 3 more seconds. Then he went up, through the cloud layer, and was gone. The street was very quiet. Then Charlie was running. She hit him at full speed and the impact would have knocked over someone who wasn't expecting it, which he was, so he caught her and she had both arms around him and was saying something into his shoulder that was a mix of laughing and crying and several things he couldn't parse. He held her back and it was warm and real and everything. Vaggie arrived 30 seconds behind her, still carrying her Shadowfire spear, and stopped 2 feet away. Her face was doing the thing. All of the things, simultaneously, everything she normally kept locked down running loose across her expression for about 4 unguarded seconds. Then she grabbed his jacket with her free hand, pulled him toward her, kissed him once, hard and fierce, released him, and stepped back. "You didn't die," she said. "Told you I was working on it." She pressed her lips together against something that was close to a smile. "Adequate," she said. Charlie made a sound at this that was definitely a laugh. Rosie appeared from the east courtyard entrance with a cup of tea and the expression of someone who'd watched the entire thing from a comfortable vantage point. "Magnificent, darling," she said. "Absolutely magnificent. The domain extension at the end was particularly theatrical. I do appreciate theatrical when it's backed by genuine capacity." Carmilla arrived from the north perimeter, her personal guard in tow, and looked at the empty sky where the exorcist fleet had been. She looked at Izuku. "You held them." "We held them," he said. She looked around at the assembled forces, her people, Rosie's warriors, the shadow soldiers standing at parade rest throughout the grounds, angel dust dropping from a second-floor window looking extremely satisfied with himself, husk coming out the front door with a full drink for the first time anyone could remember him doing. "Yes," Carmilla said. "We did." She looked at Izuku with something fully warm in her eyes for the first time since he'd met her. "Well done, Izuku." He felt the weight of it settle. Not pride exactly, something more complex, the feeling of having done something that cost everything available and found that everything available was enough. Alastor materialized at the edge of the group. He looked different. Not dramatically, the suit was the same, the smile was the same, but the smile's weight was different, carrying something lighter than it usually did. He looked at Izuku, and the smile shifted into something that was very close to real. "The Primordial King's agents," he said. "During the engagement, when your domain extended to full capacity, the burst of shadow energy reached the binding anchors. Disrupted them." He paused. "I'm not free. But the chains are," he looked at his hands. "Significantly lighter." "We'll work on the rest," Izuku said. Alastor looked at him. "You really mean that?" "I do." A long pause. Alastor tipped his hat, not theatrically, not as performance, but as the gesture it was supposed to be. "Then I suppose," he said, "I owe you something real." "Work with us," Izuku said. "That's all." "Manageable," Alastor said. He looked at the sky. "Sarah will send a diplomat within the week." "I know. Charlie should lead the negotiation. It's her proposal, her vision. She should be the face of it." He glanced at Charlie. Something in his expression was genuine and complicated and old. "She deserves to have it." "She'll have it," Izuku said. Alastor nodded once, precise, and faded back toward the hotel. They cleaned up through the morning, extraction from the aftermath, his army swelling to 480 soldiers as the strongest exorcist essences were absorbed. He didn't know what an angelic shadow soldier would become, exactly, but the system accepted them without resistance, and the soldiers that rose from angelic essence were brighter, somehow, than his others, their darkness carrying a strange luminosity. He made it work. Charlie held the negotiating table the following week. Sarah sent an envoy, not Adam, who hadn't volunteered and hadn't been assigned, a measured, careful figure from Heaven's diplomatic corps who arrived at the hotel and walked past shadow soldiers and cannibal town warriors and Carmilla's armed guards into a lobby where Vox's cameras were running a live broadcast to every screen in hell and sat down across from Charlie Morningstar. Izuku sat at the far end of the table, shadow soldiers at the door, and said nothing. This was Charlie's moment. He was there as weight, the implication of what happened if negotiation failed, but the words were hers. She was extraordinary. Not because she was loud or aggressive or powerful, though she was all of those things when needed. Because she was prepared and clear and genuine, laying out the rehabilitation program with the precision of someone who'd been building the argument her whole existence and finally had a room worth making it in. She had data, she had logic, she had the moral argument, and underneath all of it she had the sincere belief that it was true, and sincerity is the one thing that's hard to counter when you're the side with the worse argument. Heaven's envoy listened. Made objections. Had the objections answered. Listened more. At the end of 2 hours, the envoy said, "I'll take this to Sarah for formal review." It wasn't agreement. But it wasn't dismissal. And Heaven had never sat at a table with Hell's surface and called it review before. Charlie shook the envoy's hand and walked them to the door, and when the door closed she stood with her back to it for 10 seconds, completely still. Then she made a sound that was high and helpless and completely joyful, and both her fists went up in the air, and Vaggie crossed the lobby in 4 steps and hugged her, and Izuku went to them both. "We did it," Charlie said into his shoulder. "We actually, not yet," Vaggie said, but her voice was soft. "But we started it." "That's enough," Izuku said. "For today, that's enough." They stood there in the lobby of the Hazbin Hotel, the 3 of them, While Husk poured drinks he didn't charge for, and Angel Dust was dramatically emotional in a way he denied completely later, and Nifty swept the floor with an energy that suggested she was celebrating rather than cleaning, and Rosie and Carmilla stood at the bar talking with the ease of two powerful women who decided to respect each other and were discovering they had more in common than expected. Alastor sat in his corner and read something that wasn't a newspaper, and the smile on his face was, for once, entirely his own. Later, much later, when the hotel had settled into the specific quiet of a place that had been through something hard and was processing the aftermath, Charlie found Izuku on the roof. She sat beside him, tucked her hand into his, and looked at the city. "Izuku," she said. There's something I need to tell you." He looked at her. Something in her voice was different, not worried, something more interior than that, something that had been sitting with her and had decided it was time to come out. She met his eyes. "I'm pregnant," she said. The red sky went on being the red sky. Pentagram City went on being Pentagram City. The shadow soldiers kept their patrol routes. He stared at her. "I know," she said. "It's unprecedented. A demon-human hybrid has never, no one's ever even attempted it, as far as anyone can tell, because no human's ever been in hell alive before, and the shadow energy and the hellfire compatibility apparently." She stopped. "You're not saying anything." "I'm processing," he said. "That's allowed," she said. "I processed for 2 days before I told you." He looked at her. At the expression on her face, scared and radiant and completely certain, the particular look of someone who's decided how they feel about something large and is now waiting for the world to catch up. "Are you?" He stopped. "Started differently. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," she said immediately. "Excited. Like the world is much bigger than it was 3 weeks ago, and also much smaller in the best possible way." She held his gaze. "Like I want it. Like I really, genuinely want it." She paused. "Do you?" He looked at her. Looked at the city below them. Thought about the hotel and the shadow soldiers and the negotiating table and the 3 weeks that had built something from nothing in a place that most people would have said couldn't hold anything. He thought about his mother and the way she'd looked at him his whole life, like he was the most important thing she'd ever been trusted with. "Yeah," he said. "I do." She exhaled, long and slow, and leaned into him with everything, her head on his shoulder, her hand over his, and he put his arm around her. Vaggie appeared in the roof access doorway. She took in the scene. She took in Charlie's expression, and Izuku's, and the specific quality of the silence between them, and her face went through several things quickly. "Are you too?" She stopped. "Is something, come here," Charlie said. Vaggie came. She sat on Charlie's other side, and Charlie took her hand, and said, "I'm pregnant." The roof was very quiet. Vaggie said, Yes." Vaggie looked at Izuku. "Yes," he confirmed. Vaggie looked at the sky. Her jaw worked. Then she reached into her jacket, pulled out a small object, and looked at it. "I was going to tell you tomorrow," she said. "I was going to wait until I was sure." She held it out. But, the small object was a test of some kind, hell-designed, and the indicator on it was positive. Charlie made a sound like a small earthquake. "Angel-human hybrid," Vaggie said, in the voice of someone who'd had 2 days with this information and was still not fully resolved. "Which is, unprecedented," Charlie said. "Completely unprecedented," Vaggie said. "Extraordinary," Izuku said. Vaggie looked at him. "You're unreasonably calm about this." "I'm very not calm," he said honestly. "I'm just running calm on the outside because someone has to." She stared at him for a moment. Then she put her arm around Charlie from the other side and leaned in, and the 3 of them sat on the roof of the Hazbin Hotel with the weight of everything they'd built and everything that was coming, and the city below them was quiet, and the sky above was its eternal red, and neither of those things felt like a threat anymore. "So," Charlie said, breaking the silence in the way only she could, bright and warm and completely sincere. What do we do now? Izuku looked at the city. His shadow soldiers moved through it like a heartbeat, steady and constant, the domain anchors holding their positions across 6 blocks of Pentagram City, the first network of protection Hell's surface had ever had. Carmilla's arsenal was distributed, Rosie's alliance was solid, Alastor's chains were loosening, and in a building in heaven, a diplomat was delivering a proposal to Sarah that had been written by the most genuine person he'd ever met. He thought about his world. About the promise he'd made himself on this roof weeks ago. He'd come back to it. He'd find the way. But right now, in this impossible place, he had people who needed him and something worth protecting and 2 lives beginning under a red sky that had just, for the first time, meant something other than countdown. We build something worth protecting, he said. Charlie squeezed his hand. Vaggie's shoulder pressed warm against his. Below them, the Hazbin Hotel stood in the shadow domain, its lights on, its doors open, its purpose changed and growing and real. The Shadow Monarch was home. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.